Thank you. Honorable delegates, before we proceed, let me remind you that the virtual sitting constitutes a sitting of the National Council of Provinces, and the place of the sitting is deemed to be Cape Town, where the seat of the National Council of Provinces are. In addition to the rules of virtual sittings, the rules of the National Council of Provinces, including the rules of debate, apply. Delegates should thus note that anything sent to everyone via the chat screen is deemed to have been sent to the House and may be ruled upon. Delegates enjoy the same powers and privileges that apply in the sitting of the National Council of Provinces, and for the purposes of the quorum, all delegates who log in shall be considered to be present. For the duration of the sitting, delegates must mute their microphones unless if they wish to speak. Any delegate who wishes to speak should use the raise your hand function. Honorable delegates, please note that the interpretation facility is active. Delegates are reminded to please keep their videos on for the duration of the sitting. Honorable delegates, I am informed that there will be no notices of motion or motions without notice. We will now proceed to the order of the day, the debate on adjustments appropriation bill, and the report of select committee on appropriations thereof.
Come in.
Good morning. And I want to call on the Honorable D.G. Mashangu, the chairperson of the select committee on appropriations, to present the report of the select committee and to open the debate. Over to you, Honorable Mashangu.
Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy of the NCOP, Honorable Minister Ntate Titomboweni, and ministers present here, deputy ministers, honorable members, fellow South Africans, goeiemorgen. Today is the last day of the month of July, a month in which we commemorated the birth of the father of our nation, Utata Nelson Mandela. We ended the month mourning one of the heroes with whom he spent the greater part of his life fighting in the trenches against apartheid. That's Ntate Andrew Mokete Mlangeni. The former president of South Africa, Comrade Thabo Mbeki, made an appeal to the organization of these giants, the African National Congress, quote and unquote, to properly honor his memory. The ANC needs to be renewed. If we attend to the renewal of the ANC, this will be a very good farewell and a good memory, a good monument to such an outstanding person as Comrade Andrew Ntate Mlangeni. I want to say to the president, to President Mbeki and to all the veterans of our movement that we have come a long way and we are on track towards renewing the ANC. A mere few years ago, our party was accused of covering up corruption and defending those who were accused of malfeasance in governance. It is important to always analyze matters with a historic perspective. The resolution of the 54th National Conference instructed us that, quote unquote, the ANC should strengthen consequence management system against comrades who participate or found guilty of corruption. ANC leaders and members who are alleged to have involved in corrupt activities should, where necessary, step aside until their names are cleared. I would argue that no other political party in this House sets such high standards of integrity for its members and leaders. We saw evidence, Honorable Deputy Chairperson, of renewal of the ANC in presidency. And just yesterday in Gauteng, members who have not been found guilty of any wrongdoing were asked to take leave of absence. Honorable Deputy Chairperson, it is my honor once more to be able to present this adjusted appropriations bill of, on behalf of the Select Committee on appropriations. The Minister of Finance, once more, I will over and again remind the members because history will inform our future, has tabled the supplementary budget on the 24th of June 2020. The bill was tabled in terms of Section 12, subsection 1 and 2 of the Money Bills Act, which requires the minister to table a national adjustments budget as envisaged in Section 30 of the Public Finance Management Act. The Money Bills Act requires that after the National Assembly has passed the Adjustment Appropriations Bill, the bill must be referred to the National Council of Provinces and referred to the Select Committee on Appropriations in order to facilitate public participation and stakeholder involvement. And in compliance with Section 72 of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, the committee invites stakeholders and public to make input. COSATU, outer equal education, together with Section 27 and the Equal Education Law Center, Energy Governance South Africa Network, Ilifa Labantwana, Agroecology South Africa, and Prof. E. Atmo. Honorable Deputy Chairperson and honorable members, the committee noted that the majority of the resources to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic have been allocated to the health sector. It also noted that the defense and police budget have also significantly increased. The committee obviously had reservations about an increase for the South African National Defence Force, but after a long deliberations, National Treasury explained that the increased funding takes into account the disaster management regulation that provide for the mobilization of all services within South African National Defence Force, including medical and engineering assistance, help with water purification, improving border management, and providing much needed support for the South African police services during the COVID-19 pandemic. The committee recommended that the National Treasury and the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation should strengthen monitoring mechanisms for budget expenditure and program performance, particularly for the funds made available to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. Corruption and illegal activities absolutely cannot be tolerated, and drastic measures need to be taken to enhance departmental internal controls and financial management to detect and prevent financial mismanagement, fraud, and corruption. Swift and effective action needs to be taken against any irregularities, including reporting the matter to investigative authorities. That's all our responsibilities as responsible citizens. The National Treasury and the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation should investigate the root causes of under expenditure on the CAPEX by sector departments and ensure that such issues are resolved. The committee is of the view that the movement of funds from programs due to under expenditure should be used as the last resort, as these disadvantages beneficiaries of the affected programs. And those are the poor and the vulnerables. The National Treasury, together with other sector departments, should ensure that consequence management programs and policies are strengthened and are integrated into contractual obligations for capital projects and for any transgressors to be acted on swiftly. Furthermore, Honorable Deputy Chairperson, should the Office of the Auditor General of South Africa become aware of any misuse of taxpayers' funds, it must not hesitate to invoke the Public Audit Act number 25 of 2014 as amended by Act number 5 of 2018. Honorable members, the amendment of Section 6, subsection 1 of the Appropriation Act 2020, which seeks to empower the Minister of Finance to approve expenditure that cannot reasonably be delayed without negatively affecting service delivery, should be supported as it does not have any implication for the adopted revised fiscal framework or the Division of Revenue Bill B9/2020 as required by the Money Bills Act. However, the committee will continue to monitor the implementation of Section 6, subsection 1. Honorable members, the committee believes that the National Treasury should consider including development finance institutes and smaller banks as part of the institutions to disperse the 200 billion rands government loan guarantee scheme to assist struggling SMMEs during the COVID-19 pandemic and ensure improved levels of transparency around the terms and conditions of the scheme. National Treasury, together with SARS, should ensure that adequate support and assistance is given to small businesses to enable them to comply with the conditions to access the scheme. National Treasury should also expedite the public procurement bill, which will ensure that local SMMEs are well supported through local procurement. Honorable Deputy Chairperson, the committee believes that localization of procurement is a vital part of the measures to achieve inclusive economic growth and address job losses, as recently reported by the Statistics South Africa. We call on the National Treasury to consider reinstating as much as possible of the 2.4 billion rands reduction for the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, which affects the Comprehensive Agricultural Support Project grant, as well as drought relief for all farmers to protect food security and address job losses caused by the pandemic, especially given the levels of poverty, unemployment, and inequality in our country. The committee is of the view that more resources are required in the agricultural sector to support South Africans to produce food, given the uncertainty created by the pandemic. The committee supported the 1.1 billion rands relief fund to be provided to the taxi industry, given that the industry has not obtained any support from government other than the underperforming taxi recapitalization program. However, the committee is of the view that proper assessment needs to be done to determine whether the relief is still necessary, given the relaxation of lockdown regulations and high level of non-compliance with traffic and other tax laws by the industry. The committee believes that the taxi recapitalization programs is also critical, and National Treasury, together with Department of Transport, should work to improve the program performance and expenditure, given that the safety and reliability of public transport is vital for the many people using minibus taxis as a mode of transport to work. Honorable Chairperson, the committee is of the firm view that the 3.2 billion rands earmarked for the land bank recapitalization should only be transferred to the bank upon submission of credible turnaround strategic plan, and if need be, government and the land bank should revisit the current banking model of the bank to make it more efficient and effective so that it can become less reliant on state bailouts. The reliance of state-owned entities and public entities on government bailouts should be urgently addressed as it takes away resources from service delivery for the poor. While being acutely aware of the severe budget constraints, the committee supports making the basic income grant a permanent feature in the existing social security system, especially because of the devastating consequences of COVID-19. Listen carefully. The committee members, the committee requests that the Parliamentary Budget Office do a research on the feasibility of this and provide a report within 6 weeks. We need to be sure if this is doable. Whilst the committee is mindful of the progress made with regard to the public service wage negotiations, it is of the view that government and organized labor should find a way of resolving the impasse between them without any disruption to service delivery program, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. Parliament will continue to monitor progress in this regard in order to address the high level of disparity in the cost of food parcels across provinces, and also to avoid corrupt practices and unexplained price escalations, while being mindful of the differing environment in each province. The committee recommends that National Treasury, together with the Department of Social Development, put proper procurement systems in place, which will allow the digitization or issuing of vouchers, giving people the option to buy the food of their choice. This will also assist in addressing the risk of long queues and possible stampedes, which have been witnessed during the pandemic when social distancing is required. The committee believes that it is unacceptable that the inability of departments and municipalities to spend their allocated funds for programs, including infrastructure projects, implies that they surrender those funds to the National Revenue Fund at the expense of addressing poverty, unemployment, and inequality. The National Treasury, together with the Department of Planning, Monitoring, and Evaluation, should take specific measures to prevent this from happening, not wait until it happens, as it disadvantages the livelihoods of the poor and vulnerable as the intended beneficiaries of such programs. This should, Honorable Chairperson, include assisting these departments and municipalities to develop the skills to effectively and efficiently spend their budget adequately. While I conclude, Chairperson, I want to close with a few lines from the poem Little Gideon by T.S. Eliot. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. With these words, Honorable Chairperson, the poets meant that everything in the world is constantly in the state of dying and being born. That is the dialectic of life. As we renew the ANC and the old gives way to the new, it will seem that we meet and know this glorious movement for the first time. I thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Ke a leboga modulasetulo, ke a thokoza mhlali ngaphambili. Ntate o loka setjhaba sa heso. Nkosi sikelele Africa. Thank you.
Aha.
We will not put the question. We will just continue with the debate now. And we will then request the Minister of Finance, the Honorable Tito Mboweni, to continue with the debate. Over to you,
sir. Honorable members, Deputy Chairperson, I take this opportunity, first of all, to thank the members of this House, and in particular the members of the committee, for the work that they have done I very much appreciate it. I want to emphasize that we are in this situation principally because of the COVID-19 situation. COVID-19 has turned things upside down. COVID-19 has brought about major changes to our economic forecast. We now expect, as you know, the economy to contract quite significantly by plus minus 7 or 7.5%. We expect revenue collection to shrink much larger than we had thought, above 304 billion rand. So there's going to be a massive shortfall in our revenue situation, which means, in practical terms, that our ability to fund what we would have loved to fund is going to be constrained. The situation is very serious, honorable members. And at times, I get the impression that we have not all fully internalized the nature and difficulty of the difficulties that we face. When we receive regularly demands for further expenditure, I am frustrated by the lack of understanding of the difficult situation in which we are in. In fact, if we were to be frank to ourselves, all of us, we are in a period where even our own incomes are shrinking, and we should be considering reducing our own salaries because of the nature of the situation. The GDP is going to shrink, is going to be much smaller than was the case before. What we were used to before the COVID-19 pandemic as the size of the South African economy will no longer be the same. It's going to shrink. Therefore, what we can afford as well is going to be much less than was the case before. In this regard, I want to bring to the attention of the honorable members the fact that given our revenue shortages and given the pressures on the system, we have had to approach international organizations to try and help us close the gap between the revenue and the expenditure pressures. In this regard, as I've said before, we have approached the New Development Bank, the so-called BRICS Bank, and they have lent us $1 billion US. We've approached the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, and they have lent us $4.2 billion US. We approached the African Development Bank, which is a much smaller bank, and they have lent us about 5 billion rand, some 288 million US. We would be approaching the World Bank as well, and we hope that they will come to the party. But these amounts are also very small in comparison to what we need. And therefore, our shortage will still be there, and we'll be struggling in this regard. Let me come, Madam Deputy Chair, to the issue of the mysterious 500 billion rand package, which some in the media, fake news, and other places, WhatsApp groups and so on, have claimed that it has disappeared. Others even dared to suggest that it disappeared because I've stopped eating pilchards and now eat boerewors. It's nothing of the sort. The nature of the 500 billion package was a combination of different elements. The 200 billion National Credit Guarantee Scheme, which was meant to provide lubricants to the economy, to private enterprise, through the provision of a guarantee scheme. It's not money in in the National Revenue Fund. This is money that is in the system to lubricate, as I said, private enterprise. That amount is accessed by people approaching their banks to provide them with a loan as might be required. There are elements there, 130 billion rand reprioritization, X amount of money for this or the other that has come about from the reprioritization of the budget. So the notion that 500 billion rand has disappeared is really the most recent urban legends that I've ever heard about. It reminds me of the story of Vera the ghost that people who live in Johannesburg will know about. There's nothing like that. Nevertheless, I'm aware that as we have reprioritized expenditure towards the COVID-19 interventions, there have been some tsotsis and thugs who have been creating all sorts of companies to try and tender and steal, inflate prices, and do all kinds of malfeasance. In this regard, it will be very important that the Department of Health in all the provinces publishes the list of everybody who has been given a tender to supply these PPEs or other health-related facilities or products. It's very important, and I would like to call upon the MECs of Finance, my colleagues, to please join hands with me. Let us get the Department of Health to make public on their website everybody, every company that has received tenders for this intervention. It's very important that we're transparent and we're clear that there's been no overpricing, that the thieves have been kept away from the door, and that we are fully in control of the fiscals of our country. I am in conversation with the Director General of the National Treasury and also with the Minister of Health nationally, Dr. Mkhize, for us to consider immediately a system of central procurement and transversal arrangements. Now, this will be the last result in my view, because I think the provincial treasuries and the provincial departments of health can deal with this matter effectively. Now, honorable members, the purpose of this appropriation adjustment bill, as I said, is to respond to a changed situation. And therefore, our approach generally as well has to be in a changed atmosphere, where we are no longer as rich as we thought we were, where we're having to reprioritize, where we're having to do, as I said before, like they say, Gaspedi, that siblings share the head of locals together when things are difficult. So I thank you very much for the report. I've listened to most of your suggestions, including around the basic income grant, which I'm sure we'll have time to debate. For the bigger part of my political life, I've debated this matter, so I'm ready and willing to debate it once again. And as we do so, we should understand that we cannot make commitments that we cannot meet given the fewer resources that we now have, because we're now, just like the siblings in the family, having to share the head of a locust in these difficult times. Madam Deputy Chairperson, I thank you very much for the work that you do. It has been a long journey. I appreciate it. And I would always really thank you very much for the work that you do for our country. I also like to wish those who have fallen victim to COVID-19 speedy recoveries, and those who have lost their loved ones, my sincere condolences. God bless South Africa. God bless Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister Mboweni.
Thank you.
Titus Mboweni. Thank you very much. The next speaker will be Honorable D.R. Ryder of the Democratic Alliance. Over to you, Honorable Ryder.
Thank you very much, Deputy Chair. Let me tell you exactly what the problem is with the South African economy. On the 24th of July, the Parliamentary Budget Office told the Appropriations Committee what government pays for a standard food parcel across the various provinces. In the Democratic Alliance-run Western Cape province, a food parcel costs 400 rand. In the ANC provinces, where corruption is so often alleged, the price increases to 530 rand in Gauteng, to 855 in KwaZulu-Natal, and in Deputy President David Mabuza's Mpumalanga province, to 1,456 rand. That is the cost of corruption. The same food parcel has a difference in price tag of 1,056 rand to pay all of the backhanders to corrupt politicians and deployed cadres. This makes me sick. And yet, it's a mere microcosm of the bigger picture of the stolen economy in South Africa. The ANC has crippled South Africa in its seemingly insatiable need to steal from the people that it claims to serve. And so, some may wonder why the country is faced with so many hard choices, as the Minister mentioned, now that we've been hit by a pandemic. The answer is simply because the money that we should have been saving or using to grow the country has been spent on luxury cars, fancy houses, lavish lunches, and parties. Now Treasury has had to cut the budget to meet the specific demands brought about by our health crisis. What tools do they have? A downgraded economy? A wage bill struck 3 years ago in a wholly different time and environment and with a different executive. A tax revenue stream that has been throttled by an authoritarian state, shutting down an economy for much longer than was needed, for much longer than it was advised to, and for much longer than is justifiable. Minister, I think your team has really done well under the circumstances, but let's face it, this bill is a failure. Revenue streams continue to be taken away because, in your own words, you lost a fight in cabinet. The income is bleeding and the demands for expenditure just mount up, as you pointed out. The demands for bailouts. The SOEs have been milked to death. Cadre deployment, corruption, and bad procurement practices have made these once thriving entities dependent on state bailouts. The goose that used to lay the golden egg is in ICU on expensive life support, and the medical aid was used to build a fire pool. You've asked us to trust you, Mr. Minister, with the amendment to Section 6 to allow money to be spent on emergencies. But how can we trust you when we know that the pressure you're under to save the vanity projects of your comrades? How can we trust you when the fights in cabinet are won by those who do not grasp financial concepts? Keep the money for real emergencies, Minister, not for bailouts. There are many demands, as you mentioned, that can't be fully met. We have the President writing letters deploying the South African National Defence Force to enforce a curfew and telling us in those letters what the cost of that deployment will be. And yet, in the adjustment budget, the Defence Force, which already has an unfunded organogram, gets less than the additional costs of the deployment. But should we even be allocating more money on defence and the police than what we are allocating to health or economic revival? Should we be taking money away from education, including the infrastructure backlog grant, when the need is so great, especially for the supply for better infrastructure, for better sanitation? And the President says he wants to use the construction of infrastructure to lead us out of the economic crisis. Yet, almost every infrastructure project is having its budget cut in this bill. The fact is that this country is over-indebted. We have no choices left. All of the revenue that we earn is used to pay salaries, service debt, and pay social grants. That's like the family budget, where the income of the family is only enough to pay the domestic, pay the credit card, and give granny and the kids some pocket money. Nothing's left for food. Nothing's left for fixing the roof or for building a new garage. Well, no need, because the car's about to be repossessed. And so we're borrowing our way out of trouble, using an overdraft to pay off the credit card. 770 billion rand must be borrowed this year. And that's the best case scenario if we meet our revenue collection targets, which is unlikely. Throughout all of this, sadly, the theft continues. We've got the scooters in the Eastern Cape, we've got PPE contracts in Gauteng, even the President's office has been implicated. How low can you possibly sink that you have to steal money that's been borrowed to help dying and starving people just to supplement your R1 million salary? If only the Scorpions were still here, Mr. Karim. The Democratic Alliance calls for fiscal discipline. South Africa's budget deficit has grown consistently, and we have been living on credit for far too long. A cap must be set and hard decisions taken to get us back to where we can afford our lifestyles. Support the DA's fiscal responsibility bill, Mr. Minister. Zero-based budgeting will certainly be a start, but honestly, Minister, your colleagues continue to chase expensive programs in pursuit of failed ideological theories, rather than focusing on the rational economics. You need better colleagues, Mr. Minister. You need to start winning some of those fights in cabinet. The Democratic Alliance proposes urgent action on the SOEs. The talk around restructuring Eskom and turning other entities around has just gone on for too long. The DA have got plans ready for implementation. We need change in order to survive. And then, of course, we need to ensure streamlined spending on the fight against COVID-19. Not spending on jackboots, but spending money effectively on health, on education, on infrastructure, and on ensuring that our economy recovers from this disastrous lockdown. But one of the most important things that the DA has done, will continue to do, and demands that government does, is to act harshly on corruption and malfeasance. Stop the stealing. Stop the rot. Make sure that corrupt cadres and their corruptors face the harshest penalties. Don't redeploy, don't promote, send them to prison. The MFMA and the PFMA have been set up over years to help you to do this. What is stopping you, if not political will? Every cent that is meant to be spent on South Africans must be carefully applied to benefit the people who rely on this government. Every cent must be accounted for. We cannot have a 400 Rand food parcel being bought for 1,456 Rand. Deputy Chair, the report we're considering today is a good one and has many excellent recommendations. There are, however, several policy issues that have been put forward in it that we cannot associate ourselves with as the Democratic Alliance. As such, we cannot support this report, and we certainly cannot support the Adjustment Appropriation Bill as it stands. I thank you.
Honorable Ryder.
Yes,
Next will be Honorable Mvoko of the Eastern Cape, MEC for Finance, Economic Affairs and Tourism. Honorable Mvoko, over to you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Chairperson. Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Ministers and Deputy Ministers, Honorable Members of the NCOP, ladies and gentlemen. Honorable Chairperson, as you may know, it was only last week that the province tabled that the special adjustment budget that will serve as a basis for my inputs and comments on the adjustment bill that we are debating this morning. Honorable Chairperson, Deputy Chairperson, the entire human civilization has been turned upside down. We are in the eye of a storm, though some do not see it. Throughout history, it seems as if the more civilized humans became, building cities and forging trade routes to connect with other countries, the more likely the pandemic storms would gather. And these storms would ravage human populations and change the course of history. Chairperson, the constrained fiscal environment still persists. We are more than ever before required to do more with less, with the aim of mitigating the devastating effects of the sharp slowdown in economic growth. The outbreak of coronavirus could not have come at a worse time. It is further going to dampen economic growth prospects. Honorable Deputy Chairperson, the current COVID-19 plague has changed the course of our empire, flattening our plans to bring back human dignity and causing massive economic discord. This pandemic is also credited with creating an apocalyptic atmosphere among the people, spurring a rapid spread of a feeling as if the world is coming to an end. We welcome the President's announcement of the fiscal support package that encompasses spending towards improving our public health system to withstand the disastrous impact of COVID-19 pandemic. to ensure that our schools are functioning well and properly, to ensure that our social welfare service serve as a safety net for the poor and vulnerable, to ensure that our economy is revived. The financial intervention for COVID-19 coincided with a downgrade by rating agents. The projected negative growth, as just indicated by the minister before me, affect the sustainable growth and improving conditions in line with 2030 National Development Plan vision of the country. While we are concerned with the increase of state debt facility, it is prudent to note the low borrowing cost for the funding COVID-19 by the IMF. We as the Eastern Cape are pleased that the province received additional grant funding allocation from the 3.4 billion COVID-19 grant allocation component to provinces. This will help enhance our health system, its capacity and capability to mitigate the spread of the pandemic. Whilst no additional funding was provided for health infrastructure for the Eastern Cape, we, however, welcome the revitalization grant that has been repurposed to provide for infrastructure needs to respond to COVID-19. The 25.473 billion increase for social development is a welcome relief to the poor and destitute, and it will assist to support vulnerable households. Since these funds will be managed and distributed by National Department of Social Development, though it would have been preferable that some of these funds flow to the Provincial Department of Social Development, who are at the coalface of delivery. This would have decreased turnaround times to help the destitute and vulnerable. It is critical, therefore, that both national and provincial spheres of government work in an integrated and coordinated manner to ensure optimal and efficient utilization of resources. We further note and welcome the additional allocation to the local government equitable share. The Eastern Cape municipalities, in particular, have been allocated 1.566 billion of this 11 billion. As a province, we will continue to advocate for the review of the equitable share formula in order to bring parity to rural and disadvantaged provinces. I wish to inform the Minister that the Eastern Cape Treasury has started to investigate all PPE transactions by the various departments in the province. The outcome will be made public. Honorable members, we'll continue to promote fiscal sustainability through strict implementation of cost containment measures. It is of essence that we balance the health intervention with sustainable economic recovery plans. We will strive to do more with less, with the aim of mitigating the devastating effects of the pandemic and the sharp slowdown in economic growth. We are still steadfast in the developmental goals for the country. We all have a role to play to overcome the surge, including managing our resources. Let us play that part in implementing needed impact projects to stimulate our economy. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mboko. And we will debate, and we will then now call on the Honorable Brown from the Free State, MET for Finance, to continue. Over to you, my dear.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, honorable members of Parliament, Honorable Minister of Finance, the Chief Whip of Parliament, MECs in respective provinces, and Chief Whips of the respective provincial legislature. Let me join the Minister, Honorable Chair, in wishing all those who contracted the virus a speedy recovery and to provide our sincere condolences to those who lost family members and loved ones. Honorable Chair, the Minister has emphasized the transparent reporting of COVID-19 procurement matters, and we are pleased to announce that the Free State Province has already publicized the tender awards 10 days ago. Honorable Chairperson, allow me to appreciate this opportunity afforded to me by this august House. And let me also appreciate the constructive inputs provided and those that will be provided by different stakeholders and the public at large. Indeed, democracy and freedom of speech is taken its course. On the national economic outlook, Honourable Speaker, let me remind this august House that the Adjustment Appropriation Bill predominantly provided for the reprioritization. Bill further reflected on the subdued economic growth trends in South Africa, which remains a major concern to all of us, irrespective of our political affiliation. Honourable members, the COVID pandemic has added to the woes of South African economy, which is projected by the South African Reserve Bank to be contracted by 7.3% in 2020, slightly worse than the National Treasury's forecast of negative 7.2%. The last time the country registered a decline of such magnitude was during the Great Depression, when the economy contracted by 6.1% in 1930. What is now clear, Honourable Speaker, is that the COVID-19 outbreak will produce the worst economic downturn in a century. The highlights of the supplementary budget. Honourable members, allow me to emphasise that the fiscal landscape has drastically changed, and there is no better time than this one for us to institutionalise, concretise the principles of transparency, accountability, responsibility, efficiency and effectiveness in the utilisation of limited public resources. Honourable members, my plea is that as a country, we must continue to work even harder to turn around our current environmental situation, as the Minister of Finance has accentuated on the following fiscal changes during the tabling of the supplementary budget. The debt to GDP ratio is expected to reach 81.8% in the current year, which is a significant deterioration from the 2020 budget estimate. The economy is expected to contract by 7.2% this year. Tax revenue is expected to underperform by 304.1 billion in 2021 compared to the 2020 budget estimate. Revenue shortfalls include tax relief measures amounting to 26 billion in foregone revenue implemented as part of the COVID-19 relief package. We are encouraged, however, by the response of the Reserve Bank by cutting interest rates, as this will encourage investment and stimulate the economy. On fiscal framework, honourable members, I wish to reiterate that during these trying times, we should not despair. Instead, we should collectively utilise a supplementary budget tabled by our minister as a stepping stone towards stabilising the country's debts, containing budget deficit and restore economic activity to build confidence. We should further continue to demonstrate our enthusiasm to promote efficiency and prudency on our spending in all spheres of government. We must work swifter and closer with other relevant stakeholders or private partners to ensure that our finances are stable and sustainable going forward. On health and frontline services, honourable members, as the Free State Province, we comprehend the rationale behind the appropriation of funds towards health and other frontline services. Consequently, we fully support the allocation of 21.5 billion for COVID-19 related healthcare spending, which will, amongst others, include laboratory tests, costs related to Cuban health professionals, procurement of PPEs, ventilators, and additional staff. A further allocation of 12.6 billion to other frontline service departments are equally responding to COVID-19 pandemic is also appreciated. The impact of COVID-19 pandemic on our people, Honourable Speaker, especially the vulnerable citizens, persons, children, is dire and requires a collective response. We must not only talk solidarity, but act in solidarity with our fellow countrymen facing the brunt of this pandemic. Honourable members, we want to re-emphasise our resolve to support the provision of financial support to vulnerable households through the Department of Social Development and other services. Reprioritisation towards municipalities. The increased allocation towards local government, equitable share is appreciated. This allocation will indeed add much needed support to our respective municipalities to respond to COVID-19 challenges, including the provision of shelter for the homeless in various provinces. Debt service costs. Honourable members, I wish to congratulate National Treasury on allocating funds toward debt service costs. It is our belief that this decision will assist us to improve on our solvency and monetary stability in the long run as a country. This decision will eventually boost confidence on international investors. The reprioritization of funds from infrastructure. The Free State Province understands the adverse impact brought by the pandemic with regards to infrastructure delivery in the country, especially with regard to the delivery of quality infrastructure on time and within the allocated budget. However, we are of a view that reprioritization from the infrastructure grant should have been avoided, as infrastructure plays a critical and pivotal role in reigniting our economy and creating much needed jobs. However, we are not oblivious to the fact that it would not have been possible for infrastructure departments to implement the infrastructure development projects under Level 5 lockdown. We would like to encourage the expediency by those charged with the responsibility to implement infrastructure development projects to strengthen their capacity to deliver infrastructure in the remaining 8 months of this current financial year. Our other concern is on the reduction of departments that are in the forefront of stimulating economies, such as the Department of Small Business Development. This department and other related are important for employment creation and economic growth. It is also supported small businesses that were under strain due to the COVID-19 pandemic. This, coupled with the stimulus package offered by government at both national and provincial level, will reignite the economy and assist some of the businesses to get off the ground. Repurposing of the conditional grants. Honourable Speaker, conditional grants are funds allocated to the provinces by national departments to pursue concurrent functions between national and provincial spheres of government. In a way, conditional grants help provinces pursue national development priorities and address provincial disparities and backlogs in provinces, particularly with regards to infrastructure, underdevelopment and poverty. We wish to thank the National Treasury and relevant departments for their unwavering support to allow provincial departments to amend business plans for their conditional grants to cater for necessary amendments amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. Out of 41 conditional government department budget votes, 7 votes benefit from the 55.3 billion additional allocations as follows. The Department of Social Development, vote 19, receives the largest additional allocation of 25.5 billion intended for the provision of financial support to vulnerable households through the increase of various social grants and payment of the special COVID-19 relief, social relief of distress grant of 350 Rand per month for 6 months. The Department of Cooperative Governance, vote 3, receives the second largest additional allocation of 11 billion through an addition to the local government equitable share. This is to support municipalities in their increased expenditure related to the provision of basic services, including shelter for the homeless, and increases the department's baseline by 11.4% from 96 billion to 107 billion. Honourable Speaker, a true measure of any society can be found in how it treats its most vulnerable members. We pride ourselves of the deliberate support given to the most vulnerable during this pandemic. National Treasury, vote 8, receives the third largest net additional allocation of 9.3 billion to cover debt service costs, as well as 3.2 billion for the recapitalization of Land Bank, increasing the National Treasury's 2021 baseline allocation by 1.1% from 815 billion to 824 billion. On a zero-based budget proposal, Honourable Speaker, we support the initiatives in the budget process, especially with the introduction of zero-based budgeting. We encourage National Treasury to investigate this initiative, as it is believed that zero-based budgeting will improve operational efficiency, enable identifications of key cost-saving initiatives over time, evaluate the trade-offs between the benefits, costs, risks, and viability of different operational efficiency initiatives. We firmly believe that through this pandemic, there is a new normal and that the old way of conducting our operations has become obsolete, and that the new way of conducting our business requires a new operational model funded through a completely new approach, hence the suggested zero-based budget approach. In conclusion, Honourable Speaker, we must robust. Minister of Finance outlined the job creation efforts should be undertaken by both the public and private sector. Madam Speaker, we are traversing a path that we have never thought we'll come across. These are difficult times. We need to stand together and push back the frontiers of this pandemic. As a Free State province, we firmly support this budget. Kia leboa. I thank you.
Thank you. Let me see. Sure.
Brown. We are continuing and we are requesting Honorable JPC of Gauteng to continue with the debate. Thereafter, the chairperson will take over the presiding of the House. Honorable MPC.
Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Chair. Greetings to the Honorable Chairperson, Minister, Deputy Minister, all of our MECs from different provinces, honorable members of the House. Greetings from the Gauteng province. Chairperson, as the Gauteng province, we welcome and support the Adjustment Bill 2020 that was tabled in Parliament by the Minister of Finance, Honorable Tito Mboweni, in June this year. We must say, Chairperson, as we are debating this matter, we are taking solace and want to remind ourselves that we are meeting at this moment after the burial of our Istwalandwe Saparangwe and Tate Mlangeni. We want to say rest in peace Tate Mlangeni. And yesterday, we were celebrating the 100th anniversary of our own icon as well, our stalwart, the Lion of the Midlands, Honorable Comrade Harry Gwala. We, as Gauteng, want to emulate the selflessness and the dedication of their lives into whatever things that we do as a province and as a country. Chairperson, allow me to continue and say that the adjustment budget responds to the health emergency associated economic and social challenges occasioned by the outbreak of the COVID-19. Our view as a province is that the bill responds strategically to our current situation, taking into consideration the constraints fiscal environment and the increasing demands for service delivery from our people. We understand why the National Treasury has reduced our conditional grants by about 450 million in this financial year to fund other pressing of the country's response to COVID-19. Over the next MTF, our fiscal environment remains constrained, Chairperson. We must therefore be innovative and creative as to how we will balance the need for sustainability of finances with increasing service delivery demands from our citizens. As a caring government, we must save lives during this pandemic period. At the same time, we must expand economic and social relief measures to protect particularly vulnerable members of society in these tough times of our lives. Honorable Chairperson, I must also indicate that as Gauteng, we have taken measures over the last few days to ensure that we respond to the outcry of the alleged corruption that has happened in our province. We must take solace that our Premier, together with the executive of our province, have managed to actually engage seriously with the state law agencies to make sure that we deal and confront the corruptions and the allegations of corruptions by working together with organs such as the Hawks and the SIU to make sure that all those that are found to be guilty on the wrong side of the law, they must then be arrested. In this financial year, the budget cuts at the national level has necessitated us, Chairperson, as Gauteng to conduct deeper reprioritization process to fund our comprehensive response to the health and economic challenges brought by this COVID-19. We are doing all of these, Chairperson, all of these things, Chairperson, while remain focused on the implementation of Growing Gauteng Together 2020 plan that is designed to grow the economy and creating jobs in our province through the rollout of infrastructure programs and other needs that will create jobs post-COVID-19. This plan is aligned to the National Development Plan of 2030, and its key priorities are as follows, Chairperson. We want to build jobs and make sure that education and skills and healthcare also must be enhanced. Sustainable human settlements and new cities and land release to our people should happen immediately. Safety, social cohesion, and food security must be prioritized, particularly for the working class in our province. sustainable future for all is also we are going to do and focus on. We are also building a capable state that will enforce and ensure that ethical and developmental state issues are related. We want to build a better Africa and a better world, Chairperson. We must also, Chairperson, as a province working together with yourselves at the national level, that our view is that the GGT 2030 contain sectoral interventions that are key to the preservation of jobs in our province in the interim period, but also grow the economy and create the jobs that we dearly so need. Chairperson, as I close, we want to also support the minister that all of us and all of our provinces, we must continue to make sure that all the companies that have been doing work on the issues of the PPEs, we are supporting that statement, the minister, that all of us must publicly publicize the names of those companies that are doing business with the state during this period. And indeed, we must definitely ensure that we chase the thieves away from the COVID budget and other budgets that are related to COVID-19. As Gauteng, we have an open tender, Chairperson, and this open tender has assisted the province as Gauteng to curb corruption. We have managed to do so. And we're working very close with the SIU to make sure that where there are challenges of corruption, we respond appropriately to make sure that we work and arrest those people. We know that in our province, almost 6 CFOs have resigned or have been expelled from our own province due to maladministration. And we must thank our province for engaging in that. And we are not going to stop there, Chairperson. We are also, Chairperson, going to make sure that as we have now started yesterday, when our Premier, David Makura, has suspended or put our MEC for Health on special leave, and the MMC for Economic Development in the city of Johannesburg also on special leave, while the investigations are continuing. And we want to encourage all provinces to do the same so that we are able to respond to these particular challenges of corruption. As I close, Chairperson, and we need to be honest to ourselves. And I want to honestly challenge, and one day maybe if we have time, Chairperson, engage with Honorable Ryder himself to actually give us proof about the budget that he has spoken about, that other provinces except Western Cape, that all other 8 provinces are bloating the prices on the food parcels. He must prove it to us, and we want to engage with him on that particular issue. But as Gauteng Chairperson, we want to support this bill and want to thank the minister for the sterling work that he is doing under the circumstances. It is not the time now to play games. It's the time now to save lives. And then let us make sure that all of us must stop scratching each other's face, but make sure that we save the lives of our people. I thank you very much, Chairperson. Thank you very much.
Over to you, Honorable Sheikh, and from there it will be Honorable Ngwenya. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, Sheikh. Yeah.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Chair, and good day to honorable members. Honorable Chairperson, due to the global COVID-19 pandemic, we are in a situation of a national state of disaster enforced through the nationwide lockdown. This has necessitated the correct decision by government led by the President to ensure that our country mobilizes its resources in the fight against this COVID-19 global pandemic. COVID-19 is not of our own making. It is a pandemic which the whole world is still grappling to respond to, and the scientific world is working tirelessly to bring us closer to a remedy which will further strengthen our response to this deadly disease. Honorable Chair, the Adjustment Appropriation Bill is necessitated by this reality of COVID-19, which has disrupted the social and economic activities in our country, as well as globally, government correctly has to adjust and reprioritize this budget allocation in response to the fight against COVID-19. At the center of government's response to COVID-19 is to save the lives of our people. Honorable Chair, the declaration of the national state of disaster, the nationwide lockdown, and the development of all the regulations by government was done to ensure the safety of citizens as well as ensuring that regulations, protocols are adhered to in order to save lives of our people. As a result, our law enforcement agencies had to play a critical role within their constitutional and legislative mandate to enforce compliance with regulations developed by the government in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. This also meant that the police and other law enforcement agencies, such as the Defense Force, are in the front line of fighting this pandemic. During this period of a nationwide lockdown, the police reported painful incidences of gender-based violence as the lockdown regulations were relaxed. The complexities of the manifestations of gender-based violence and femicide in our society requires a closer examination in order to inform how, as a nation, we should act against this pandemic, as the President has said. Furthermore, following the unbanning of alcohol on the 1st of June 2020, there has been an increase in violence and gender-based violence. We condemn these brutal acts and urge the police to act without fear or prejudice in bringing these criminals to justice. We urge our society to support the police by ensuring that these criminals and criminal activities are reported to the law enforcement agencies. The allegations of police brutality against civilians, especially during the lockdown, had also been brought to our attention through various platforms. We urge the Independent Police Investigative Directorate, whose mandate is to ensure policing that is committed to promoting respect for the law and human dignity, to act without fear or favor in ensuring that these cases are investigated and appropriate recommendations are made and that the law takes its due course. We stand for the protection of the rights of our people, and as such, we urge everyone, including the law enforcement authorities, to respect the rule of law and human dignity. Chairperson, another matter of concern relates to the instability in the executive management of IPID. The appointment of the IPID head, which we support, will further strengthen the drive to stabilize the institutions to ensure that it executes its mandate optimally. The appointment of the Executive Director of IPID, Ms. Jennifer Huntlaseng, is a significant appointment because in the history of IPID, there has never been a woman appointed as an Executive Director. This appointment supports the cause of women empowerment and the advancement of gender equality led by the African National Congress government. Furthermore, IPID needs to strengthen the audit action plan in line with the opinion of the Auditor General. It is recommended that IPID should implement consequence management against officials who make or permit irregular or fruitless and wasteful expenditure, also given the financial challenges that are faced by IPID. Chairperson, it is common cause that the police alone cannot defeat crime. Police need the cooperation of the community in the fight against crime. It is this compact between police and the community that needs to be strengthened and which is likely to ensure that there's greater cooperation, coordination, and reduction in the negative perceptions towards police by some sectors of society. As we move forward, we reiterate that IPID, as an independent police oversight body, requires stability in its leadership and investigations. It is a critical part of the quality assurance that is needed to ensure public trust in police officials, and if it is to succeed, requires the support of all partners given the huge tasks it is faced with. Chairperson, the President, as empowered by Section 201, subsection 3 of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, and Section 18, subsection 2 of the Defence Act of 2002, wrote to Parliament to request approval for the deployment of the SANDF, and Parliament accordingly approved the request by the President. The deployment of the South African National Defence Force during the nationwide lockdown was intended to support the South African Police Service in enforcing the lockdown measures. The deployment also included working together of the South African Medical Health Services with the Department of Health in the fight against the COVID-19. The Defence Force was also deployed to work with the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs to maintain and enhance the living conditions of the population. The initial deployment of the SANDF included at least 3,000 members of the Defence Force. This deployment was to all provinces in our country and to conduct roadblocks to assist in medical screening for the delivery of essential services, as well as maintaining the integrity of our borders. We welcome the important supporting role that the SANDF has played during South Africa's effort to curb the spread of COVID-19. Their deployment includes the provision of treatment and to educate our people about the virus. However, the deployment of the members of the Defence Force has not come with challenges. We are aware to the reports of allegations of heavy-handedness by law enforcement agencies as part of operations during the lockdown. We should note that these allegations have pointed to only some members of the Defence Force. We derive confidence in the knowledge that the courts and the Military Ombuds Office will assist in getting to the bottom of these allegations. Chairperson, the Defence Force continues with its international obligations on the continent during this time. And it is while this period of lockdown is a difficult time for South Africa in the fight against COVID-19, some important lessons have been learned and will guide us as we move forward. Chairperson, as we said earlier, we need to build a social compact as a society to mobilize our resources to fight against crime, to fight against gender-based violence and femicide in our society. Our people deserve to live in a safe environment, and it takes all sectors of society to make this a reality. Chairperson, the African National Congress supports the Adjustment Appropriation Bill. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The next speaker is Honorable African National Congress, KwaZulu-Natal, MEC on Finance. Over to you.
Thank you, Mkai. Honorable Chairperson of the NCOP, Deputy Chairperson of the NCOP, Honorable Members, the Minister of Finance, ladies and gentlemen, comrades and friends. We hold this debate at a time when KZN is threatening to become a new epicenter of COVID-19 infections. Just yesterday, we had reached an unwelcome milestone of 73,919 infections, 767 deaths, but we take hope from the 32,483 recoveries. The scourge is, one must add, is not entirely unexpected given the population size and the frequent movement of people to and from provinces such as Gauteng and the Eastern Cape, both of which have been hard hit by a high number of COVID-19 infections in recent months. What this means, as has been said in the debate, that more and more of our resources, human and financial, must be deployed to treating COVID-19 patients while ensuring the safety of our health workers. But this also means that we have to take every possible step to avert any possibility of the health system being overwhelmed. And this we continue to do by ramping up our preventative measures, which includes testing, contact tracing, and isolation of confirmed cases, and continuing with the enforcement of the disaster regulations. This massive medical intervention requires billions of rands to be dispersed into various programs. And to fund our response to COVID-19 as KwaZulu-Natal, and as directed by National Treasury, we are able to source the 6.210 billion rand from internal sources, as I said, as guided by National Treasury. To source these funds, we've had to cut the provincial department's equitable share by 3.7 billion, with only health and education exempted from this exercise. The transfers to public entities were also cut by 204 million, and further funds were sourced from preliminary underspending in the 1920 financial year of 1.9 billion and the preliminary provincial own revenue over collection of 410 million. We also sourced 175.9 million from funds previously recalled from departments due to slow or non-spending on specific projects, and 190 million from our provincial contingency reserve, leaving our provincial contingency reserve with 200 200 million rand post the adjustment budget. But as former President Nelson Mandela put it, after climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb. We also realized that our response was going to require much more than 6.2 billion rand. Honorable members, in fact, a costing exercise revealed that the provincial health response alone requires 8.2 billion, while education requires 2.8 billion, and transport in respect of learner transport and in enforcing the social distancing in the transport facility requires 214 million. The KwaZulu-Natal province's response will therefore require the 11.5 billion, 1.2 billion, and 197 million respectively. In total, we still need to source some further 2 billion between now and the adjustments budget to be tabled in November 2020, but we have made a very good start. We are mindful that there are many variables which we will monitor with great care as we head towards our second adjustment budget. As the budget cuts were unavoidable, we had to take great care to ensure that they do not affect key programs, especially those geared towards addressing the triple challenges of poverty, inequality, and unemployment. And this brings me to another point we want to raise as KwaZulu-Natal. We fully understand the rationale behind the reduction of some grants, but we feel that some which will have a negative impact on key programs need to be re-examined. And one such is the reduction of 497.218 million from the education infrastructure grant. Whereas we note that 197 million of the funds cut from the education infrastructure grant will be utilized by the Department of Basic Education to provide water through Rand Water to 1,125 KZN schools, we believe this will have a severe negative impact on infrastructure in schools. The reduction against this grant will have a negative impact on the provision of critical services such as the eradication of pit latrines at 1,377 schools, the eradication of asbestos in 908 schools, and the upgrade and rehabilitation of 1,026 storm damaged schools and the provision of early childhood development centers. Honorable Minister, I am not lamenting and I'm quite mindful of the conditions in which we find ourselves, but to the extent that the President himself has announced the rollout of a massive infrastructure program, we believe that these issues should find expression in that infrastructure program. In a society haunted by high levels of poverty and inequality, and where education offers the only hope for those trapped in poverty, this becomes an absolute necessity. As a province that runs the largest education system, not attending to these challenges means subjecting a significant number of our children to unacceptable conditions. Honorable members, we feel strongly about this, and hence we will continue to engage the Department of Basic Education. But as KwaZulu-Natal, we have said we will not let these budget cuts paralyze us. We believe the limited resources should provide even more impetus to us achieving the highest levels of efficiency, effectiveness, and with a transformative character. Through our actions, we have acted against suspected irregularities, and we continue to demonstrate our commitment to prudent management of public resources. Let me make it quite clear, honorable members, Chairperson and Minister of Finance, in KwaZulu-Natal, we are fighting corruption. You will have noted in the media that we released 2 reports on the Department of Social Development, and it was for the first time that we were able to conclude investigations within a period of 8 weeks. We've released those results, made it public, and consequence management is following. Just yesterday or the day before, you have seen people appearing in court with regard to transgressions, with regard to catering in the office of the Premier, and that reflects our commitment. That is the actions that matches our words with regard to the fight against corruption. Honorable members, the program of the province, like nationally, is broken up into 4 pillars, or is made up of 4 pillars, which is the health and medical interventions, and we must not underestimate the size and magnitude of these programs with regard to public health education, the treating and testing, the preparation of the hospitals, the quarantine sites, the isolation sites, and public education, I want to come back to, is a major exercise. We are working in partnership with national departments, with the support to the vulnerable, with regard to the top-up on the grants, the UIF, the TERS, the food parcels, and a wonderful partnership with civil society in respect of food parcels and soup kitchens. And this is part of the social compact that we need to build. And if there is time, I will speak about it a little later. The third pillar is the compliance with the national disaster regulations. And here too, we want to commend our South African police services, the emergency services, and the compliance officers for working together in a coordinated program to achieve the objectives of the regulations. And then, of course, lastly, but by no means least, is the economic recovery plan, which is far advanced and we hope to be able to release soon. And I want to report, Honorable Minister in particular, that we've been working with the private sector leadership of the economy in KwaZulu-Natal, which we've broken up into 11 sectors. We've had intensive engagements identifying those areas that are capable of quick recovery with support and those that might need a little bit of a longer term. Honorable Minister, I want to use this opportunity to say that the credit guarantee scheme definitely needs more transparency, as has been indicated. We understand the bank's responses sometimes when we engage with them. There's issues of client confidentiality. But the bottom line with this money, while it's the bank's money, it's backed by a government guarantee. And therefore, there is a legitimate public interest in how it is actually rolled out. We want to make sure that each province gets its fair share, and we want to make sure that the opportunity there is not strangled through bureaucracy or unacceptably high credit risk requirements. We are encouraged by this week's response that is being reviewed, but we will see it in practice and we will want to monitor it. We'll ask the Minister to help us to have a more effective monitoring on that particular scheme. Honourable Minister, we've already in the budget speech published our expenditure per department on the COVID-19 expenditure, and to date we've spent about 1.980 billion rand on COVID-19, with the biggest departments being health at 1.3 billion and education at 485 million. We will take your advice, Honourable Minister, with regard, which you've already started, with regard to publication of the COVID-19 expenditure into the public domain. With that, and my time having run out, I will say thank you, Minister, and we want to wish you well in the considerably difficult task that you have. And as KwaZulu-Natal, we support the bill. Thank you, Honourable Chairperson.
Thank you. Remember, the next speaker is Honourable Mukause. Honourable Mukause from Economic Freedom Fighters.
Thank you, House Chairperson. House Chair, we want to put it categorically clear as the Economic Freedom Fighters that we do not support the Adjustment Appropriation Bill tabled before the Council today. The Adjustment Appropriation Bill before the Council today is a bill in terms of Section 2132A of the Constitution, and it is a bill that is to government departments to spend their allocated budget. This bill was tabled by the Minister of Finance on the 24th of June because the appropriation bill he tabled in February 2020 was not only short-sighted, misguided, and off the mark. It was also a demonstration to everyone that we have entrusted public funds with people who call themselves leaders, but fail to foresee a crisis coming and make necessary preparations. The Minister is going to take a podium later on, House Chair, like he did in the National Assembly, and continue spreading what we have correctly and timelessly exposed as for 500 billion COVID-19 economic support package, Urban Legend. What is Urban Legend, House Chair? Urban Legend is a humorous piece of information that is being circulated as truth, when in reality, it is not. Here are simple facts that even the Minister and delegates in this council who are going to speak after the EFF have spoken cannot dispute. Number one, There's no 500 billion COVID-19 economic support anywhere. There was never 500 billion, and there will never be one. What we have is a PR exercise gone wrong, Mr. Mbowe. The imaginary 500 billion is composed of a 200 billion loan guarantee, which will never be exhaustive, and even if exhausted, will benefit white people, minority privileged of this country. 70 billion of tax deferments, 40 billion rand of workers' deferred wages, and 130 billion of reprioritization, which means money from other equally important functions. Number two, House Chair, it is not true that majority of tenders awarded to COVID-19 PPEs and COVID-19 related expenses were awarded to legitimate businesses. Those were awarded to thugs masquerading as senior government ANC officials. What we also know as a matter of fact is that members of the ruling party, including in the highest office of the land, saw COVID-19 as a big bonanza. They have awarded contracts to their husbands, their wives, their girlfriends, concubines, their children and friends to deliver things they know nothing about. That's how they are taking South Africa for granted. The National Treasury, FIC, SARS, and crime intelligence all combined are useless because they're serving a faction of the ruling party that is now, its mission is just to loot and bring this country down. Even the courts are happy to help to seal documents that will expose corruption. The documents that are the funders of the CR17 campaign today are major suppliers of COVID-19 PPEs and beneficiaries of a 200 billion loan guarantee scheme. But House Chairperson, something more disturbing and morally bankrupt is happening right in front of our eyes. You clap hands, all of you, and even go to an extent of raising flags in the middle of a corrupt ANC government. The reprioritization program postponement and budget cuts of other equally important functions of the state are not informed by any expenditure review or analysis. Instead, we are just following IMF austerity drivel and instruction to cut expenditure like headless chicken who cannot think for themselves. House Chair, as a result, the 316 million that was budgeted for historically disadvantaged institution in the Department of Higher Education and Training has been cut. These are institutions in Venda, in Limpopo, Matatiele, Tsolo, in the Eastern Cape, Kuruman in the Northern Cape, and Nhlanzeni in Mpumalanga, and many other TVET colleges in rural parts of South Africa. House Chair, 155 million funding for technical and vocational education and training colleges has been cancelled. 4.6 million budgeted for taxi recapitalization and road maintenance has been cut. It is workers who travel long distances between provinces, most of the time on unroadworthy taxis, who will suffer the most. More than 2.4 billion in agriculture, land reform, and rural development was cut. And this money was meant for comprehensive agriculture support, land acquisition, and redistribution meant to support Black farmers in the Northwest, KwaZulu-Natal, and the Free State, who are farming maize. 2.3 billion budget meant for human settlements grants and urban settlements development grant has been cancelled despite the massive housing backlog in this country under the ANC government. It is people in Alexander, Umlazi, Guguletu, and Marikana who continue to suffer the most, while majority of you sitting here in this council sleep comfortably under a proper shelter. Mr. Mboweni has reduced the budget allocated to basic education by 2.1 billion rand. This was money meant for infrastructure, teacher training in math, science, and technology, and money for life skills through the HIV grant. But he does not care because it doesn't affect him and the ruling elite. 1.4 billion in science and innovation budget was cut. Science and innovation for many learners in rural areas will forever remain a television scene they watch while children of Mr. Ramaphosa, Mr. Mboweni, and his colleagues in cabinet continue to enjoy such privileges. In a nutshell, this is Mr. Mboweni's adjustment bill. House Chairperson, the idea that the solution to the collapsed public incapacity of the state to deliver basic services rely on tenders for everything can be fixed by centralizing tenders, and national treasury is foolish, misguided, and elevating looting to yet another level. Take the EFF advice, Mr. Mboweni. Don't mark the EFF advices as coming from an opposition. We said, build state capacity, abolish tenders, Mr. Mboweni. This is the only practical way we will be able to defeat COVID-19. And definitely, austerities implemented with such pompous and petty attitude displayed by some at church, 40 Church Square. Mr. Mboweni, you're losing the war against corruption and COVID-19. The EFF do not support this adjustment appropriation bill. I thank you.
Well said.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The next speaker is Honorable MOS.
Well said.
We didn't expect that.
Leadership. We are ruling.
Thank you.
Truth will
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, Deputy Chair, Minister and Deputy Minister, MSCs who are present, NCOP members.
Oh, Charlie.
Chairperson, the effect of COVID-19 has been devastating to the world economy. In the beginning of this year, it was predicted that the world economy would grow by 3.3%, and due to the last phase of the pandemic, these predictions could not be seen, hence triggering a deep recession in the world economies, leaving a lasting scars through lower investments, loss of jobs, and disintegration of global trade and supply linkages. At this stage, the global economy is now predicted to contract by 5.2% by the end of 2020, whereas South African economy is projected a contraction of 7.2% by the end of this year. This devastation would be the biggest of the national and global economy in more than 90 years, hence causing our country's unemployment rate to increase by 1 percentage point, having reached 30.1% in the first 3 months of this year. Chairperson, the economic pressures which were exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic requires us as a nation to reposition ourselves in a manner that will enable us to continue our quest to transform the lives of the majority of South Africans. The stimulus packages which were announced by the President create a platform upon which this required speed must be propelled. That we are happy that the Minister of Finance, in the presentation of the Special Adjustment Appropriation Bill, was able to reaffirm government's commitment to ensure the success of the stimulus package, including creating an enabling financial platform for provinces to support the efforts of the President and the national government. Chairperson, the National Treasury's decision to reallocate provinces' contributions to the announced package and retaining our equitable share contributions in our respective provinces has empowered us to reprioritize our provincial budgets in order to fund COVID-19 programs and projects in the province. just to clarify those who are living in an imaginary world. In this regard, as Province of Limpopo, we are able to reprioritize and adjust the 2021 existing budget allocations to provide for the rapidly changing economic conditions and enable spending in response to COVID-19 challenges, as well as amending changes in the conditional grant allocations. In our reallocations, the province has reprioritized spending on health, education, the Provincial Economic Recovery Plan, and infrastructure maintenance. This has reaffirmed our approach on catalytic infrastructure investment that can contribute to higher long-term growth, addressing spatial disparities, transforming the economy, and the creation of much-needed jobs for our rural province. The province has earmarked projects that will revive the provincial economy, focusing on water, roads, and industrial infrastructure, as well as sectors with high job absorption capacity, such as human settlements, agriculture and agro-processing, and the local economic development. Chairperson, it's also worth noting the pronouncement made by the Minister of Finance, Minister Mboweni, that the National Department of Public Works has, through the Provincial Infrastructure, the Presidential Infrastructure Coordinating Council, published in the Government Gazette the strategic integrated projects, and Limpopo will be benefiting as follows. On strategic integrated projects, that's SIP-19, water and sanitation sub-projects, phase 2 of Mokolo Crocodile River West Augmentation Project, Oliphants River Water Resource Development Project phase 2, and Letaba River Water Development Project, Nwamitwa Dam. On the second level, on strategic integrated projects, SIP number 21, on transport sub-projects, we've got the N1 Musina Ring Road, and we have got the N1 Polokwane Eastern Ring Road phase 2. Chairperson, we must indicate that the relaxation of the procurement regulations to fast-track mitigation measures of COVID-19 has opened doors for corrupt activities, amongst others, some in the private and the public service. In mitigation of this, as the province of Limpopo, we have put measures to ensure the continued accountability and the prudent use of public resources, especially of COVID-19 projects and conditional grants. We shall avail all resources to support all initiatives announced by the President and the work of the law enforcement agencies in the investigation of all wrongdoings in the utilization of state resources, particularly COVID-19 targeted funding. Corruption is a developmental sabotage against the efforts for development of our society. Chairperson, we therefore believe that the reallocations made of this adjustment appropriation bill will mostly certainly build a foundation upon which we reconstruct our economy to create a platform for all South Africans to reclaim their livelihood under these trying conditions. In encouraging words of Ralph Waldo Emerson, when he once said, "What lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us," close quote. Our work to build a just, equitable, and prosperous nation must most certainly continue without let or hindrance. Honorable Chairperson, we therefore support the adjustment appropriation bill as tabled. Kialeboha, Akens.
Well done, Siparo. Order, members. Order. The next speaker is Honorable W.A.S. Ocampo.
There's a point of order. I'm rising on a point of order. Chairperson?
But there's no sign of raise of hands. Mukause, hawa phamisa letsogo la hawa ko bone.
Akushebe, Akoshebe.
Ke bona o iphamisa ona no.
Our chairperson, I'm
Mara
writing
ke
on
bona o
a point of order.
iphamisa.
I'm writing on a point of
Shebile
order.
phela ngwaneso.
Chairperson,
Bua.
when parties are allocated time, it's their time, and they must speak on their time and finish within their time allocation. Now, I spoke for 7 minutes. It is extremely wrong, Chairperson, that you and whoever is advising you relating to time cuts our time. I'm going to suggest that they put our time there on the screen so that everyone can see their time. So it is very wrong. I want my 2 minutes. I want to finish what I did not finish.
Thank you, honorable member. The next speaker, the next speaker is Honorable W.A.S. Ocamp, please.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Chair. Honorable Deputy Chair, Honorable Minister, members of this House and fellow South Africans. In order for South Africa's finances to be run properly, we must strengthen our monitoring mechanisms. We must ensure that corruption and illegal activities should not be tolerated. We must put in place measures to detect and prevent financial mismanagement, fraud, and corruption. We must ensure that consequence management programs and policies are strengthened. These are all measures that the Democratic Alliance has insisted on numerous occasions in the past. It was therefore very good to see that these measures have now been incorporated into the report of the Select Committee on Appropriations on the Adjustment Appropriation Bill. Honorable Deputy Chair, the 500 billion rand question, however, is whether these measures will now at long last be implemented. In this regard, the track record of the ANC government is warning me to be very skeptic. There's an old saying that says, talk is cheap, but money buys the whiskey. Well, Honorable Deputy Chair, apart from the fact that money literally can't buy the whiskey in South Africa anymore, this old saying has got a lot more relevance on this ANC government when it comes to sound financial management. This government does a lot of cheap... Can I reclaim my time, please? This government does a lot of cheap talking when it comes to the fight against corruption and mismanagement, instead of implementing the desperately needed measures to stop corruption and mismanagement for which this ANC government are now infamous for. With regards to the mismanagement of our country's finances, I do believe that it is important to note with disgust that our debt service cost has increased with 7.2 billion rand due to the fact that South Africa's credit ratings have been downgraded to junk status. To put this into perspective, Honorable Deputy Chair, our additional debt service cost could have bought us 18 million food parcels for the 50% of South Africans who are experiencing hunger on a daily basis. The mismanagement of our finances by this ANC government is therefore literally taking the food out of the mouths of our people. A further worrying factor, Honorable Deputy Chair, is the fact that during this health pandemic, the budget of the Department of Health has been increased with 3 billion rand less than the increase that our security clusters have received. It seems to me that it is more important for this government to ensure the enforcing of its draconian, power-hungry measures by employing 75,000 soldiers on our streets during this lockdown than it is for this government to assist our citizens with the medical assistance that we so desperately need. Agbare voorsitter, ons land word gekenmerk deur die ewel van aanvalle en moorde op die mense op ons land se plase. Hierdie is nie net aanvalle op ons boerderygemeenskappe nie. Nee, dit is ook 'n direkte aanval op ons land se voedselsekerheid. Hierdie pas afgelope naweek het ons met afgryse moes hoor van die moord op die 83-jarige Dan Brandt en sy 70-jarige vrou Breggie, as ook al dogter Elsabie op Hartswater in die Noord-Kaap. Ons het verstom gestaan toe ons moes hoor van die moord op Jeremiah Solomon Machekwe, Saterdag op 'n plaas buite Marble Hall in Limpopo. Ons moes verder hoor hoe die bejaarde en bykans blinde Christian van die Kerk van Alexandria tydens 'n rooftog by sy plaaswinkel vermoor is. Agbare voorsitter, al hierdie moorde net in een naweek op ons land se plase. Dit is hoogtyd dat hierdie regering daadwerklike aksie neem om ons boere en hul werkers by te staan en te beskerm. Hierdie begroting skiet ver te kort as dit kom by die beskikbaarstelling van fondse vir die beveiliging van ons landelike gebiede. During the meetings of the Select Committee on Appropriations, the Democratic Alliance has fought very hard for more money to be made available to assist our farmers who are battling with the devastating effects that this prolonged drought has got on them and on our country's food security. I'm very pleased to say that in the end, the Select Committee on Appropriations was united in our sentiments. We unanimously agreed that more needs to be done and more money needs to be made available in order to assist all our farmers who are affected by this devastating drought. It is therefore not making any sense, Honorable Deputy Chair, that the Minister of COCTA, Minister Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, refused to renew the national state of disaster with regards to the drought, wherein she declared during February that the whole of South Africa was a drought disaster area. This is just another one of the countless indications that this ANC government is totally out of touch with the reality and the needs that the people of South Africa are experiencing on a daily basis. Honorable Chairperson, this adjustment budget can be compared to my golf. Nothing is on target. It is always in the rough and never on par. And just as impossible as it is for me to become a professional golfer, it is impossible for this ANC government to manage our country's finances properly. The Democratic Alliance does not support this bill. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The next speaker is Honorable P.S. Ngomane, Mpumalanga, MEC for Finance, Freedom, Front Plus.
Malibongwe, Ngomane.
Bongwe.
Correction, Honorable Member.
Correction.
MEC for Finance.
Yes. I will never join that one.
No, it was a mistake, MEC.
No, thank you. Chair, House Chair, honorable members, good morning. We welcome this opportunity to participate in this important debate on the Special Appropriation Bill for 2020-21 financial year. Just a few months ago, none of us knew that our world will be turned upside down, that world economies will be disrupted, the livelihood of millions around the country will be impacted so severely. COVID-19 has indeed changed our lives with the resultant negative effects on our health, education, and general well-being of every member of the society. The pandemic visited us at a time when we are also grappling with low economic growth and a trial of poverty, unemployment, and inequality. We must, however, not get weary of confronting the present challenges because the lives of the poor depend on the decisions that we take in this parliament. The words of President O.R. Tambo are worth to note at this juncture when he said, and I quote, "Even when in bleak moments we were never in doubt regarding the winning of the freedom. We have never been in doubt that the people's cause shall triumph," close quote. I agree with the sentiment of many patriots who spoke before me that we will overcome this pandemic. House Chair, the principal objective of the 2020 Special Adjustment Bill is to enable the government to respond to the current state of national disaster. It allows the government to reprioritize resources in order to minimize the impact of COVID-19 in the communities. Notwithstanding the reduction in the provincial baseline, the bill makes an important contribution to the fight against COVID-19 in our province. Flowing from this process, we have added 1.2 billion to the health sector as it carries most of the burden of COVID-19 pandemic in the province. This is in addition to the 34 million from the National Disaster Fund, which helped us to reset the healthcare system to respond to this global emergency situation in our province. The addition of COVID-19 component to existing grants in the sector as alluded in the bill will also assist us to respond to critical needs for the sector. We are completing the resources providing through this bill to ensure that health workers have personal protective equipment and ventilators, to hire additional staff, and to assist in responding to the additional caseload resulting from the pandemic. House Chair, our province has also reprioritized the budget to respond to the drought situation, to increase access to clean water in schools, and also identify communities which were affected due to this pandemic. The province is committed to working with all stakeholders to ensure the limited resources are used solely to respond to these health issues. All in all, we regard the bill is an important milestone in our quest to save lives and reignite the economy post-COVID-19. Mpumalanga Province supports the special appropriation bill presented in this house. In regard to what a member of the DA indicated about the cost of the food parcels in Mpumalanga included, we would love to get proof, because what he was alluding here in this house is not true. And we are prepared to work hand in glove, because we are prepared to be fighting corruption wherever it comes in the province. So we are awaiting the proof of what he has indicated here. And food parcels are not the same. Some they come with 2 tin stuff, some they come with a lot of things. So the prices will never the same. So come with the proof and come with the package. We are going to assist with the truth. Thank you.
Thank you, MEC. The next speaker is Honorable Freedom Front Plus.
Agbare voorsitter, dis met leedwese dat die VF+ vandag ons innige meegevoel toon aan almal wat geliefdes aan die dood afgestaan het. Ook in die families, naasbestaanes en vriende van slagoffers wat in die onlangse plaasaanvalle gesterf het. Dan en Breggie Brand en Elsabie van Halfvaalaarts, Jeremias Macheki van Marble Hall en Popo en ander, julle sal onthou word vir jou opoffering. Chair, the phrase, "never let a good crisis goes to waste," was coined by Rahm Emanuel, the former mayor of Chicago. It has been adopted by some political leaders in South Africa and seemed to be the phrase they live by. while the majority of South Africans are drowning in the economic desperation. Minister, the figures of this bill has been discussed. I will not be going into it. Maar dit is 'n onbetwisbare feit dat die meeste Suid-Afrikaners een of ander mate hulp gedurende hierdie inperkingstydperk benodig het. Die teendeel is ook waar dat indien die regering nie verantwoordelik was vir die verval van die ekonomie voor die COVID-pandemie nie, die impak van die pandemie nie so erg op die Suid-Afrikaanse ekonomie sou wees nie. Die rigiede, meedoenlose inperkingsregulasies was egter die laaste spyker in die spreekwoordelike kus, met minister Dlamini Zuma wat met 'n oorgroot hamer in die hand bly staan. Spykers van onregverdigheid, skaamteloose diskriminasie en beperkende besigheidsvernuf is met dowwe, verwarrende hamerslae in die kus gedryf terwyl kaders smalend toekyk. Minister, less financial support would have been needed if government didn't restrict trade, job creation and economic growth by unfair black economic empowerment and affirmative action legislation. Less financial support would have been needed if the state coffers were not subject to years of looting and self-enrichment. Our children, and possibly their children, would not have had to bear the future financial burden of interest and international debt that needs to be paid back as a result of theft by the political connected elite. Less financial support would have been needed if infrastructure hadn't been damaged by the culture of burning and destroying. Die kultuur van wanbetaling is oor die jare gekweek en het deel van sommige se DNA geword, tot so 'n mate dat die adjunkt president Mabuza 'n beroep op sy ondersteuners moet doen om te betaal vir wat hulle ontvang. This culture of entitlement has corrupted so many to the extent that many are living in denial, Chair, turning a blind eye in spite of the fact that hungry children roam the streets and were supposed to be respected are being scorned. Government allowed COVID funds, relief funds that were supposed to alleviate suffering and deficiency to be distributed, handed out to the same people that governed and mismanaged municipalities and legislatures into the ground. This disaster has been used to cultivate political mileage, Chair, but at a cost. Political hyenas are salivating in anticipation of the release of the COVID funds to sink their teeth into a portion of what was intended for the survival of a nation. A king, provincial legislatures, municipalities, politicians and their direct and extended families, even a president's son are being questioned for COVID funds. Voorsitter, die vraag bly, gaan hierdie fondse voldoende wees om Suid-Afrika te red, of eerder sal Suid-Afrika die diefstal en korrupsie wat deur die ANC inperking vererger word, oorleef? Chair, vultures are circling to get the last pickings from the corpse of the South African economy. The champagne socialists are tending the wounds of the vulnerable. Be aware, some are using this crisis to waste what is yours. The Freedom Front Plus doesn't support this adjustment appropriations bill. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I would like to invite the chairperson of NCOP, Honourable Amos Masondo, to come to preside and invite Honourable MK.
House Chairperson, before you vacate.
No, I'm about to allow me to speak. It's my turn to speak now.
Before you vacate the seat, House Chairperson, can you try and sort out our issues of time? We have issues of time and we did not finish. Give us our few minutes left as a party so that we finish what we wanted to speak about. Before you vacate,
Honourable Member, Honourable
No, Chair, my
No. You have speak, and I didn't say to you the time is finished. So don't disturb our debate. Honourable Muyaman, can you please take the podium?
Chairperson, you are very much disrupting.
Thank you, Honourable Chair.
House Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Chair.
House Chair.
But you ANC, you think this is an ANC rally, man?
House Chair.
Order, members.
On the point of order, Chair.
Point of order, House Chair.
Order, members.
What point of order? On a point of order, House Chair. Chair, Honorable
Yes.
Honorable Makause raised a point of order, and she told you about the issue of her time, and then you promised that you would look at that. Now that you have finished your session,
Honorable member,
can you listen? Can you listen to the point of order?
I'm listening to you. I want you to
How
answer
can you
me.
speak while I'm speaking if you are listening?
I'm chairing this
if you are
meeting.
listening. Listen to me. Listen.
I'm chairing this meeting. Can you listen to me?
Please.
I'm chairing this meeting. You are not chairing.
Competent in chairing it.
Can you listen to
Honorable
me?
Chairperson, you can't say a meeting like that. I raised a point of order. You gave me the platform. Now you are interrupting me.
Respect
How are
the
you going to
presiding
hear my point of
officer.
order? How are you going to hear my point of order? How are you going to hear my point of order? Because you are not listening.
Don't shout me.
Honorable Chairperson, I'm saying to you, Honorable Makause raised the point of order, and then she raised the issue of her time, and then you made a promise that you will look at that. Now you are vacating the seat. Who is going to look at that matter? Because you still have 2 minutes that you have to finish a speech. You actually said to her, she have 1 minute left. Why she have 3 minutes left?
Are you done?
Yes, can you rule on that? Can you give back Honorable Makause her time, please?
Honorable take a decision on a ruling on the time is finished. Therefore, we are continuing with our debate. Honorable can you please?
Thank you.
Can you please come in?
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, I rise on behalf of the African National Congress to support the report of the committee and the adjustment budget. Indeed, as the chairperson has reminded us, the bill is part of the supplementary budget tabled on the 24th June as a response to the novel coronavirus. Honorable Chair, it is important to note that indeed various credible research has been done, and there is consensus that this pandemic is unprecedented. And indeed, what it has done, it has sharpened the contradictions and the true fault lines in the form of the high levels of inequality and deep level of poverty. Honorable Chair, clearly it has also again reflected that the pandemic has not affected all of us in the same way, precisely by virtue of these fault lines. Those with high-paying office jobs have largely been able to work and earn an income from their homes. Those in low-paying precarious work have lost their jobs and income or have been forced out work. Honorable Chair, these same workers have to risk infection on public transport that are operating at full capacity. Children at private schools are at schools and they were learning online, while the vast majority of learners in the public system are at home. Indeed, Honorable Chair, given this situation, The question is whether the adjustment budget will assist us in terms of addressing these fault lines. Honorable Chair, as we are grappling with this question, we are inspired by Marx's teaching on Feuerbach, and I quote, "All philosophers have interpreted the world in various ways. However, the point is to change it." Honorable Chair, indeed, in response to this teaching of Marx, Engels, and Lenin, various authors have pronounced themselves. Amongst them is Pepjin Berson, who says that, I quote, "Following decades in which the governing consensus largely dismissed the effectiveness of state intervention in many areas of life, differently in different parts of Europe, the pandemic and the response to it have highlighted the power of the state in no uncertain terms, notably in its central role in providing universal health care and essential economic relief. What was previously by many as politically unnecessary, undesirable, or just impossible has been shown to be both essential and deliverables." Honorable Chair, we have a caring and listening government, and indeed, it has responded in reprioritizing and reallocating budget. It has readjusted the budget to protect and assist the poor and vulnerable. It has said we need to put in place financial management which must raise debt affordably and repay it sustainably. Indeed, it has said we must reallocate budget so that we are able to promote equitable growth. Honorable House Chair, 3 messages that are coming from the adjustment budget. And I'm afraid, Chair, it is not speaking about food parcel. Chair, it says we need a fiscal consolidation that must address the major inequalities in our country. And it says, first, the narrow measure of the budget deficit for 2021 has, as a result of COVID-19, shifted. And indeed, it has shifted from 6.8% of the gross domestic product to 14% of the gross domestic product. Government had in the original 2021 budget projected its revenue for the fiscal year to be 1.3 trillion as a result of the shutdown and lower economic growth. Government now expects revenue to be 1 trillion, a shortfall almost of 3 billion. Expenditure, on the other hand, which was initially projected at 1.7 trillion, is now projected to be 1.8, an increase of about 44 billion. The net result is that the deficit originally expected to be 368 billion is now estimated to be 709 billion. Indeed, this is a message of a caring government. It has been able to respond. Honorable Chair, as the ANC will always be the first to admit that there has been weaknesses in the execution of our mandate. But of course, we are responding in a manner that is scientific in our approach. And we are highlighting those decisive interventions. The Department of Transport, as indicated, has set aside a billion relief package to the country's taxi industry. And we are saying there again, South Africa in particular needs to keep a close eye on all aspects of labor market. Hence, we notice also the intervention on the part of the Department of Public Works in prioritizing labor intensive program through expanded public works program. Honorable Chair, again, the Department of Social Development has been allocated an additional 41 billion to be able to cushion and mitigate those that are vulnerable and the poor. And this has been illustrated in various top up for all social security grants. And also in addition to that, the ones top up of 350. This indeed, Honorable Chair, is in addition to what the tourism industry has been made to intervene, particularly given the fact that tourism industry has been hardest hit owing to the lockdown in South Africa and restriction on travel tourism activities. Indeed, Honorable Chair, as you all know, thousands of business, black and white, owned are in distress, and jobs that have been lost or on the verge of being lost. We have seen our government intervening through various guarantee schemes worth 200 billion. In addition to that, Honorable Chair, many companies have also benefited through the temporary employer relief scheme established to provide financial relief to employees during the COVID-19 through the UIF. It is worth noting and reminding the critics that despite the earlier teething problems, the temporary employee relief scheme has so far disbursed billions of rands. Honorable Chairperson, the Department of Industry has embarked on a wide range of measures to deal with the COVID-19 crisis. And we have also seen various interventions through curbing the price hike during the pandemic through the work of the Competition Commission to repair the damage of COVID-19 and reconstruct the economy. We have seen also programs that create jobs to bring more young people into the entrepreneurship and increase economic inclusion, which we all need to, and we all need to think boldly and implement them smartly. Indeed, Honorable Chairperson, the industrial age is not over, but the economy of the future will be profoundly reshaped by digital technologies, greener industries, and industrial agility. South Africa must find the niche in this new environment. As the President has said, there can be no return to the old normal, and nor should there be. Most of the established industries remain critical in our economy, but they have shown that they will never be able to create the millions of jobs required. To prepare for the post-COVID world, government must strengthen efforts around reconstruction and recovery, including broader pacts with workers and business, focus on saving as many firms and jobs, identifying new opportunities, embracing digital technologies to recover and change, and addressing economic inclusion with greater agency. The ANC calls on government not to allow any company that employ people to collapse. Indeed, we want to see
more rapid transformation of the economy and inclusive growth going forward. But we cannot afford childish stance in the process that other political party seems to be playing. Indeed, Honorable Chair, it cannot be correct that other parties that are childish in their approach, they cannot be allowed to mislead on national media platform, apparently seeking to agitate workers to go on artificial stay away after the easing of the national lockdown to level 3. It is irresponsible for them to be heard, to be saying we should do like we did during apartheid. We must refuse to comply and stay at home. We must engage in stay away. If this white economy collapse, let it collapse. If you are going to die of hunger, let us rather die with our boots on than dying protecting the white monopoly economy. This is childish. Honorable Chair, indeed the ANC rise to support the adjustment budget. Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you very much, Honorable.
Moi.
Yes, man.
The next speaker is Honorable M. Kosho. Honorable Kosho.
Thank you very much, Chair of NCOP, Deputy Chair, House Chair, Minister and Deputy Minister, my colleagues in Budget Council, members of NCOP, Honorable Chair, the 2020 Adjustment Appropriation Bill we are debating today is done when South Africa is battling the surge of coronavirus pandemic, the very reason why there has been a need to table the adjustment budget. In the midst of the pandemic, we should appreciate the leadership provided by our Minister, Ntate Mboweni, under the guidance of His Excellency, our Minister, for holding the financial fort of the country under such difficult conditions and tabling the special adjustment budget for consideration on the 24th June 2020. And our Minister's firm stewardship has ensured that the ship is sailing and remains on the right course even in the midst of this pandemic that has negatively affected the economy and the manner in which the government of South Africa had planned to deliver services. This guidance has ensured that the dwindling public purse is geared towards the betterment of the lives of the people of this country. The funds have indeed been targeted towards saving the lives of the citizens and securing the future of generations to come. The rapid world spread of the coronavirus caught us by surprise. And we had to respond to the challenge posed by the pandemic by readjusting our 2020 pledged and budget, which was actually also starting the 6th administration. As a Northwest province, we are in full support of the measures taken by the Minister of Finance to prioritize the fight against the disease through budget reprioritization, for which our province redirected in excess of 1.1 billion towards health response plan. As the province, we decided to defer some projects into the future, as it's impossible to spend budget with the current forced lockdown situation. In addition, just like at national, the Northwest province has registered revenue under collection in the first quarter, the negative impact of which can only be mitigated by further budgetary reprioritization by all departments and municipalities. As government, we are responding to the pandemic by reprioritizing its budget towards measures aimed at addressing the coronavirus. It is important to find balance between fighting the pandemic and not losing sight of the key service delivery commitments. Provision of basic services within the reduced business continuity should not be compromised whilst dealing with the pandemic. This is an added pressure to the current shoestring public purse, but we dare not despair. The South African economy has recorded another quarter of contraction following the annual economic decline reported for 2019. The unemployment rate has increased at 31%, which impacts directly on our social support to those households that live in poverty. This situation cannot change by chance. It can, however, be improved with the implementation of appropriate economic policy interventions to encourage localization to spur job creation or job opportunities. As provinces, we know that the special adjustment budget does not bring additional funds for COVID-19 to the provinces. Instead, the funds must be reprioritized from the existing budget. During the engagements with the provincial departments and public entities in the province, critical and hard decisions had to be made to suspend some of the planned programs and projects for future financial year, with the objective of ensuring that the government responds adequately to the COVID-19 pandemic. Honorable Chair of the NCOP, as a caring government, this budget demonstrates our desire to save life and to provide the necessary support to the vulnerable people of our country. It is therefore important to ensure that funds reprioritized for COVID-19 interventions are utilized effectively and efficiently. Transparency and accountability will be key to ensure value for money. Treasuries have to put measures in place to closely monitor the utilization of the funds of COVID-19 related expenditures and ensure compliance to applicable legislative frameworks. As a small open economy, South Africa is vulnerable to negative international economic factors. Our exports have been severely affected by the outbreak of the pandemic, with all forecast indication a decline of not less than 6% for 2020. The current COVID-19 risk adjustment mitigating strategy, has serious negative impact on the national and provincial economies, but preserving lives remains our highest priority at this juncture. As part of government continuous efforts of mitigating against the impact of lockdown to our tourism sector, we are encouraged by the relaxation announced by the Minister of Tourism yesterday in relation to intra-provincial travel, inter-province travel regulations, which will go a long way in bringing the provincial economies steadily back to normality. Honorable House Chair of the NCOP, Honorable Chairperson of the NCOP, municipalities are the cold face of service delivery as a result of providing service. And they are inundated with service delivery requests from communities. The demand for basic services such as water, electricity, refuse removal, and sanitation services have increased substantially since the fact that more of our community members have been confined to their respective homes during the lockdown period, resulting in higher demand and consumption of services. Following the additional allocation to the municipalities, as the Northwest, we are geared up to ensure that the additional funds are used for the right programs and are for the benefits of the local communities. This government will not spare any effort in uprooting corruption and implement punitive measures of non-compliance so as to ensure that good governance and service delivery is more effective. Honorable members and Chairperson of NCOP, as of the 29th of July 2020, the number of confirmed COVID-19 cases in the Northwest Province were at 18,231, with 529 people being hospitalized. The number of deaths were recorded as 70, with 8,162 recoveries having been registered. Our most affected district has been, honorable members, the opening of the economic activities where the mines were opened had resulted to that effect. Honorable Chairperson of the NCOP, as we are at the end of the International Mandela Day month, it is appropriate that I conclude my presentation by quoting the wise words of Tata Madiba, and I quote him when he addressed at Davos during the occasion of unveiling the ANC's economic vision and calling for a society case on freedom and dignity, and when he said, I quote him, motivated by nothing other than the fact that of our common humanity and of all continents. Let us then do together what we can and must do together in the interest of all humanity, close quote. As leaders from various provinces, we must be guided by nothing but the promise that we have made to our people when we assumed office in 2019 as the sixth administration, that we will provide quality health services. The adjustment budget ensures that the health and welfare of South Africans are safeguarded. By doing so, we will also be securing the future of our children by ensuring that health protocols at schools are met. I wish to send sincere condolences to citizens that have lost loved ones through COVID-19 pandemic. A loss of loved one can never be easy on anyone. This is time where we need to support one another. We thus commit that government will continue to focus efforts on fighting this pandemic. I further wish to send sincere condolences to public office bearers and frontline health workers that succumbed to the pandemic. Their contribution in the fight towards the pandemic will be remembered and appreciated by future generations. I appreciate the opportunity, Honorable Chair of the NCOP, to participate in this debate for the Adjustment Budget Appropriation Bill of 2020 and hygienic protocol, comply to the regulations and social distance, continue to put on our mask and wash our hands frequently. As the Northwest Province, we support the special adjustment budget. I thank you.
Thank you, MEC. Chair of the Council. Okay, advocate.
Oui.
Advice.
Oui.
Ask the chair to unmute.
Bartman, if Bartman is there, may he please proceed. But according to the Zoom group chat, there seems to be a problem.
Thank you, Chairperson of the NCOP. The problem has been resolved.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Chairperson, fellow South Africans, the adjustment budget as tabled on 24 June 2020 by Minister Mboweni modified much of the 2020 budget. 130 billion rand was reprioritized, 30 billion rand of which will be reprioritized within respective provincial budgets, excluding conditional grants. There are currently no changes to the Western Cape provincial equitable share in the bill. The reprioritized amounts are within the respective provincial budgets. In other words, provinces have to fund their own COVID-19 response. And Chairperson, I just would like to say that reprioritization has become the new fancy English euphemism for budget cuts. In the Western Cape province, we had to cut more than 2 billion rand within our budget to fund our COVID-19 relief response. Local government in the Western Cape will see an increase in the equitable share amounting to a total of 721.7 million, but this is a mere 6.5% of the total national funding to local government. Provincial grants have been adjusted down by 7.2 billion rand nationally and local government conditional grants by 3.6 billion. Of the provincial disaster relief grant for drought relief, the Western Cape receives 25 million rand for drought, an amount which is not only wholly inadequate for the drought response in the province, but does not take into account that in the previous year, we had to use 50 million rand of our own money from the Provincial Revenue Fund to fund drought relief. I thus consider the 25 million rand a mere accounting entry. Further, there's a net decrease of 56.9 million rand in grants to the Western Cape province. So despite an increase in the health grant, National conveniently forgets to tell people and announce to provinces that they themselves must pay for the Cuban doctors brought in by the national government. The national budget cuts to our grants include cuts to the education infrastructure grant of 160 million, provincial roads maintenance grants of 162 million, 2 agriculture grants amounting to 30 million, which was meant for infrastructure at our Elsenburg College and agricultural training, human settlements development grant of 202 million, and title deeds of 44 million rand. In fact, due to the fact that our equitable share has not been increased and due to the grant cuts, 100% of the cuts in the current provincial budget for human settlements is due to national government cutting our funding. Further, there is a net decrease of 203 million rand in grants to Western Cape municipalities. Further, the Western Cape Minister of Finance, Minister Mania, yesterday released the first edition of the Procurement Disclosure Report. The Procurement Disclosure Report details all personal protective equipment procurement and expenditure in the Western Cape in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. This report is a world-class example of transparency, accountability, and innovation in clean governance. The report will be published on a monthly, quarterly, and annual basis so that every person in the Western Cape can have access to every single PPE transaction, which will include the name of the supplier, the description of the item, the unit price per item, and total spent. The Western Cape is the only province to release this information, and I challenge the National Ministry and every other province to do the same. Further, in light of the COVID-19 relief response through Section 25 of the PFMA, the Provincial Minister of Finance authorized the use of funds from the Provincial Revenue Fund to defray expenditure of an exceptional nature during the COVID-19 crisis. Of these funds, 1 billion rand was allocated to the Provincial Department of Health to spend on COVID-19 activities related to staff and facilities, as well as 400 million to the Department of Transport and Public Works, required for the hiring of venues and facilities and purchasing of associated services for quarantine and isolation purposes as a key component of the health strategy to combat and deal with COVID-19. However, Speaker, while the DA delivers a budget to beat COVID-19 in the Western Cape, Pretoria uses this crisis to line the pockets of cadres and comrades. I would thus like to urge the National Minister of Finance, Minister Tito Mboweni, to, with immediate effect, implement the following. 1. National Treasury must urgently change the provincial equitable share formula so that every province gets its fair share. We cannot wait for the formula to be reviewed in 2 years' time, as by then it will be outdated. The funds must follow the people. And if someone believes that they will receive better healthcare or better education in the Western Cape, and if they choose to travel from Gauteng or Eastern Cape in order to receive such service delivery, then by all means, come and fetch your service delivery. But as a province, we can only do that if the funds follow the people. If we receive more patients in the Western Cape because of the failure of other provinces, then the equitable share formula must reflect that. If we receive more students in the Western Cape because of failure of other provinces, then the equitable share formula must reflect that. And if we need to build more infrastructure in the Western Cape because of the failure of other provinces, then the equitable share formula must reflect that. Secondly, National Treasury must allocate funding to national mandates that the Western Cape is currently funding due to the lack of funding from respective national departments such as safety and drought. Third, the International Monetary Fund loan of 70 billion rand is by no means an achievement, as Minister Mboweni would like us to believe. It is the final lifeline that a country needs as a result of over 2 decades of financial mismanagement, state capture, bailouts for failing state-owned enterprises, and poor policy. It is a loan simply to keep the country running on steam. And for this very reason, National Treasury must take control of every single cent of the 70 billion rand received from the IMF and only release funding to provincial departments and municipalities who have received an unqualified audit. If anything below an unqualified audit with findings was achieved, the National Treasury should spend the money on behalf of the respective provincial department or municipality. Those with unqualified audits can then still decide how they want to spend the money, but the actual accounting administration of the funds should remain with the National Treasury then. In all cases, the spending of these funds should be subject to a further check and balance through a special Inspector General. And finally, National Treasury must refund the more than 2 billion rand of the Western Cape budget cuts. No laybys, no IOUs, no more pinky promises, no fancy English euphemisms for budget cuts, no more cost is no issue lies. You do not get to come and parade around the hospitals and then leave knowing full well you do not intend to give us a cent. Refund our budget cut and give us our fair share. Chairperson, I thank you.
Thank you very much. Now the next speaker is going to be Councillor S. Mondlane. And as we all know, the name Mondlane reminds us of this iconic leader of Frelimo in Mozambique. And one of those who led the revolution there. But Honorable Khosho said that, well, local government and municipalities at the cold face of service delivery. So without any waste of time, let's have as our next speaker, the Salga representative, Councillor S. Munden.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. Honorable Chairperson, Minister and Deputy Minister, honorable members, my fellow colleagues representing local government in the NCOP, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol is observed. Chairperson, as Salga, we acknowledge and support the 5.3% increase in the allocation to the local government sphere, an increase of 7.4 billion from 132.5 billion to 139.9 billion necessitated by the COVID-19 pandemic. We also support the bill, Chair, for recognizing local government sphere's role in responding to challenges brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. As a consequence, the additional allocation of 11 billion to support municipalities increased expenditures related to the provision of services, including shelter for the homeless, is welcomed. It is worth noting that the state of local government finances was already in a precarious position prior to the pandemic. This, coupled with the problematic culture of non-payment of services rendered by both business and households, together with escalating levels of government debt, has seen the financial sustainability of municipalities under severe threat. Chair, the Auditor General in his MFMA General Report 2018-2019 has indicated the deteriorating financial health of municipalities and indicated that, I quote, municipalities render services and deliver goods to consumers with the expectation that they will pay for them. However, there has been a growing trend of established businesses and households across chain showing signs of diminishing ability to pay for these services or completely refusing to pay, close quote. The outbreak of the pandemic and resultant lockdown has had a negative impact on the economy as a whole, with business, especially small businesses, withstanding the worst of the impact. Local government has not been spared, with municipalities recording significant loss to revenue. This trend is expected to continue, Chair, in the short to medium term. It is anticipated that the economic contraction and resultant job losses will see rate taxpayers struggle to pay property rates and service charges, while the number of indigent households, it is set to increase. The above-mentioned factors require now more than ever for local government to exercise good governance principles. Hence, the leadership of organized local government on 18 June 2020 resolved, amongst others, to intensify the demand for accountability from municipalities. To this end, organized local government is resolute on its call upon law enforcement agencies to expedite their investigations on all transgressions of applicable prescripts as reported by the AG. Further, in an effort to alleviate the pressures on municipal budgets, SALGA has recommended that municipalities must individually apply for exemption from the collective agreement as provided for in the process set out in the agreement. The deteriorating financial health status of municipalities attested to by the Auditor General indicates that the underlying assumptions on the funding of municipalities as envisaged in the White Paper on Local Government has not materialized, with 34% of municipalities posting operating deficits. This indicates that urgent need to speed up the review of financial fiscal framework for local government needs to be expedited. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mumdani. The next speaker is Honorable Lon.
Thank you, Salga.
Honorable Lon.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Minister, and members. Before I start, I truly wish that I could just take Honorable Bartman's speech and replay it for members in my time slot, because that was something worth listening to and very powerful. And I hope the Minister made careful notes. There's also a saying that goes, change is as good as a holiday. Now that can be interpreted in different ways depending on the situation. So when my colleagues asked me to do the sweep for today's budget, I immediately agreed for a few reasons. The first is that I usually have to deal with ministers of departments where they ruin small businesses. That's the order of the day, or a minister that's looking after an increasingly smaller number of employed people in the country. The second, that's linked to the first one, is that apart from the weekend special minister we had in the previous term, and another one who was recently in the news for other transgressions, we usually have quite a few competent finance ministers, not necessarily in the kitchen, although I applaud anyone that give their hobbies their all. But on a serious note, this department has the responsibility to juggle a shrinking economy, an ever-decreasing tax base, ever-increasing population dependent on the state safety net, a crisis like we haven't seen before, a governing ANC party who steals without shame and then defends it without thinking about the millions suffering in the country because of the selfishness displayed by the very same ANC leaders. The problem is that we blame only the leaders, when in fact it is an entire organization that is guilty of enabling the looters. I said it earlier in the week and I will repeat it. History will judge you. Honorable Mahlangu from Mpumalanga, apart from the fact that our country is losing billions in legal revenue from the legal sale of alcohol and tobacco products, you showed us clearly today that there is some strong stuff found in Mpumalanga, because you must be smoking something illegal to come here today and say no
Order, don't just speak just allegations.
Sets such high standards for members when it comes to fighting corruption.
Chair.
History
Point of order. Point of order.
Hold on a minute, Lont. What's the point of order?
No, Chair, the honorable member from the Western Cape is saying that Honorable Mahlangu is smoking something else that is confusing her mind. I think the member is out of order. It's unparliamentary. He must withdraw the statement he made against the Honorable Chairperson Mahlangu. He's out of order. He must behave. He must not behave like a brother bond activist.
Chairperson, please must learn to listen. That's not what Yaku said. You must learn to listen properly.
Oh, you are out of order equally. Take off that cap. Take off that cap.
You must learn to listen carefully.
You are out of order.
You
must never defend liberalism. You are defending liberals. You are a wrong person in the liberal space.
I plead with you to allow the honorable member to speak.
No, but Chairperson, he must withdraw that statement he has made against Honorable Mahlangu. He must withdraw it. The DA members must behave. This is not an apartheid state. It's a democratic state. Nanta must behave. Take off your cap, Nanta.
You cause chaos. Every time you enter in the house, you cause chaos.
No, because you misbehave. That's why.
It's always the case.
Misbehave. You don't behave like parliamentarians.
You always.
You don't behave like parliamentarians. You're out of order.
Chaos all the time.
DA members are out of order. You are out of order, DA members.
Members, can we allow the chair to make a ruling if a point of order is called? Please.
Can we allow
the chair to run the meeting?
We are now descending to something else.
Honorable Lord,
Honorable members, may I
to deal with this
following point.
racist
As you debate, please ensure that you do not use words that may not be in keeping with the rules on how we should ordinarily run and conduct our debate. So it's a plea. Let's please avoid creating a situation that will be unpleasant, not just for you, but for all others, and indeed for the House as a whole. So I'm pleading with you to please allow Honorable Member to move ahead, debate the issues, and move towards concluding the debate. The member has 5 minutes. So he spent about 2 minutes, 34 seconds.
But he insulted me.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. As I was saying, is the problem
Chairperson, on a point of order.
When it's an entire organization.
Honorable members have made a ruling.
I want to plead with you, Chair.
All of us have a responsibility to conduct ourselves in a manner that is in keeping with the rules of the House. Chief Whip.
Yes,
Chairperson, I want to make
allow the chair. Let's appeal, honorable members. Can we allow that the ruling of the chair stands? The chair noted all matters that has been raised, and at any right time, the chair can give any ruling. But for now, the chair is appealing that the proceedings take place.
Thank you, Chief Whip. I want to respect that, but members of the DA are insulting us in the chat box.
Oh man!
Yeah, they are. You can't read. You must read.
Honorable Rabuskhane, on what point do you want to rise?
She's swearing at us, that Honorable Labuskhane.
Labuskhane, on what point are you rising?
Mic on.
Can you have one person speaking at a time? I'm now asking Honorable Labuskhane to indicate on what point is she rising.
I'm rising on a point that someone must put up the. Thank you, Chair. Now it's quiet because while Honorable Lund started to speak again, there was noise in the background so that nobody could hear him. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. We'll now proceed. Honorable Lund.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. As I said,
must stop insulting us.
The problem is we only blame the leaders, when in fact it's an entire organization that is guilty of enabling the looters. I said it earlier the week, and I will repeat it. And Honorable Mpisi must please listen. History will judge you. Honorable Mashlangu, apart from the fact that the country is losing billions, and the fact that you make a ludicrous statement that the ANC is the only party that fights corruption, just remember, history will as the very first
Honorable Lord, can I just make a plea and really urge you to address the House through the chairperson and not speak directly to Honorable Mashlangu. Otherwise, we're going to have a dialogue which will not be to conduct in conducting our business as a house in general. So please proceed.
With all due respect, I mean, if we are debating and we are debating on matters that the previous speakers rose, then I am within my rights to respond to that. Now, I take note of your ruling. I will continue with my speech, but I hope you will apply it consequently going forward to everybody, consequently. As the very first speaker, Honorable Shangu, through the chairperson, I had some time to consider your words. And based on the actions of the ANC, you probably meant that there is no other party like the ANC who fight to be at the center of corruption, to be the closest to the feeding trough, because there is nothing you won't steal. You won't stop stealing from the elderly. You won't stop stealing from the young. You won't stop stealing from the most vulnerable. And during this crisis, the ANC will steal from the sick and those tasked for caring for the sick. You are a shameless, shameless organization. History will judge you, Honorable Mpisi, through the chairperson. Now you wanted to do an ANC Friday on social media. I'm so glad that history is starting to judge you today because it's trending. Futsek ANC, history will judge you. But I will go even further by saying two things that might be controversial, but it has some truth in it. As South Africans, each and every one of us who are old enough to vote must do some introspection. Wherever you live, why do South Africa allow the ANC to steal, loot, pilfer, raid, defraud, embezzle, and plunder the money that is meant for all? That is money meant for all 9 provinces, money that is meant for the 60 million people in the country, not just start carrying ANC. No, Chairperson, you cannot do this. There was interruptions. There's still a minute left.
No, I kept time quite carefully, and every time I stopped, the watch stopped.
Yeah.
We've been monitoring that very, very closely. In fact, we're now 5 minutes, 19 seconds.
Chairperson, with all due respect, if you just monitored the stealing of money from your colleagues as you did the time, the country would be in a much better place.
Is the word
please don't do
that.
that.
Parliamentary chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mkiva.
Well done, Honorable Lund. Well done.
No.
Chairperson.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Honorable.
Yes.
Point of order.
Honorable Mkiva.
Can we settle down, please, so that
on a point of order. I will not stop speaking until you address my point of order.
What is your point of order?
About a month ago, I raised the question of timing in virtual settings with you in the chair as well as with Honorable Lucas in the chair. I requested that all of us would be able to see the watch that is timing. It's not been done. I cannot accept this ruling because other parties also complained today about the timing. It is unacceptable that when you don't like the speech, then the time is done. Honorable Lund was not given his full 5 minutes, and I will go into this, and we will not proceed with a plenary on Tuesday.
No, he was.
Point of order, Chair.
Honorable
sorry, sir. I'm sorry. Deciding officer
I monitored the time quite closely, and every time he was stopped, the watch stopped, and he had his time. In fact, we gave him a few seconds more. I see there's Honorable Dambo has his hand up as well.
Yes, Chair.
Honorable Dambo, on what point they rise?
Yeah. Honorable Chair, Honorable Lund used the words futsek. Is that parliamentary?
Yeah, that can't be correct. I didn't quite hear it properly. But now that you are raising it, let me revert back to Honorable Lund. Honorable Lund, did you use the word futsek?
Chairperson, Can you hear me, Chairperson?
Yes, I'm listening.
Okay, good.
Did use the
Chairperson,
word.
I said I will respond, Chairperson. South Africa across the country today is saying, FUTSEC ANC, stop stealing the money.
So you did use the word FUTSEC.
Mute him. South Africa.
And I'm sure, Honorable Lord, you know that you can't use that word. So I'm asking you to withdraw.
Chairperson, can you help me with the synonym for FUTSEC?
Please, Honorable Lord, let's save time. I'm asking you to do a simple thing. Please withdraw.
Chairperson, on a point of order.
Chairperson,
please withdraw.
Chairperson, I myself withdraw using FUTSEC, but South Africans keep telling you FUTSEC ANC.
No, I want you to withdraw the word FUTSEC and not put any condition.
Chairperson, I withdraw. I withdraw, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We'll then move over to Honorable
Chairperson.
Please proceed.
My hand is up, Chairperson.
On what point, on what point, Everest?
Our Chairperson, it looks like I'm rising on a point of order.
What is the point of order?
Looting the country. You are even coming here to the council and looting our time. That is incorrect, Chairperson, and you have now copied the disruptive manner of Honorable Ngwenya, who comes here and robs us of our time. Chairperson, we need our times back now. We want our times back. We want to finish what we wanted to say.
Unfortunately for you, Honorable Nkawuse, that's not the point of order.
That is a point of order. That is a
point of order. Our 2 minutes, Chair.
It's a point of order, Chair.
Now you
I'm not going to allow anybody to speak except
Chair, that is a point of order.
Mara Chair, 2 minutes. Our 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
I have a point of order. My hand has been up.
No, can you please put your hands down now? Can you listen?
No, you will not touch me. I have my rights.
Chairperson, it gives me a great pleasure and a singular honor to address
Honorable Chairperson,
summation to the ANC debate.
You must listen to the point of order, please. Let's stay with the quorum of the House. There has been a point of order by the Honorable Rider, and you must listen to him. So, Honorable
Mr. Oko, chairing this plenary. You are not chairing this plenary. Can you be disciplined and be a disciplined citizen of this country?
Honorable Kiva, please proceed.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, for giving me this opportunity.
Strongest terms that you are marginalizing me, and I demand to be recognized.
What do you know about marginalization? Chairperson.
Children are experiencing the draconic BEE policies of this ANC government every day. They are being marginalized. Let's listen to the Honorable Rider.
In your life.
Honorable Mkiva, please proceed.
Chairperson, I will be heard.
Dear Chairperson,
we will not sorry, Honorable Chairperson, I rise on a point of order. My point of order is that you give the Honorable Rider his opportunity.
I've not allowed you to speak. I've not allowed you to speak. Mkiva, please proceed.
Thank you very much, Chairperson.
This is objectionable behavior on your behalf. I will not be silenced.
Honorable Mkiva, please proceed.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, for giving me this opportunity. And greetings to you. Greetings to the...
Can you just tell me why I'm not given an opportunity to be heard?
Mr. Ryder, you spoke at the beginning of this plenary. What are you talking about? Can you please give us time to proceed?
Now I'm going to allow Honorable Mkiva to speak. And I'll ask the table to ensure that not supposed to speak are muted. Please
Chairperson,
continue.
parliamentary, I will not be silenced.
Kiva, please proceed.
Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces.
You can't behave like that. Honorable Kiva.
Good afternoon, Chairperson, and thank you for the opportunity. Greetings to you as the chair of the NCOP, and I also wish to acknowledge the deputy chair, as well as the chief whip and all the honorable members of this august house. Let me, from the beginning, state that this adjustment appropriation bill is about, and I will tell you what is it about and what it is not about. It is an adjustment bill which responds to an unforeseen pandemic which carries the name of COVID-19. Since this was and is unforeseen and not planned for, government had to respond with supplementary budget to the normal annual budget cycle to deal with the new challenges. Therefore, the bill reflects adjustments to allocations mainly targeted at the coronavirus disease interventions. The fiscal and the economic impact of the national state of disaster declared as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic has made it necessary for the Minister of Finance to table a special adjustment budget to revive government's spending priorities for the year 2020-2021. And therefore, it is very important for us to understand and grasp the political consequences of this pandemic. For the African National Congress to meaningfully assist in this global crisis in order to fight to flatten the curve of the spread of the virus, there has to be a focus on forms of economic and humanitarian intervention. The impact of COVID-19 on South Africa will see at least a 7% reduction in GDP, which is a disaster in itself, on top of the fact that the country is already in a technical recession with 2 quarters of negative growth. Conservative estimates by the National Treasury put the likely loss of jobs at 2.2 million, and it could even be higher. This on top of an unemployment figure of 38.6% using the expanded definition of unemployment, meaning that we shall top 40% unemployment of the economically in the near future, a human and economic disaster. This is not the time for politicking, but it requires a true leadership. For South Africa, the pandemic has hit at a time when government is attempting to eradicate the historical legacy of economic, social apartheid and colonial policy, which has generated structural inequality and is primarily responsible for its continued reproduction. In addition, Chairperson, we are ranked as the most unequal country on earth, and this with deepening levels of poverty, rising inequality, and rising unemployment. The impact of the pandemic has the potential to result in a huge social and economic unrest and upheaval. This we have the collective responsibility to avoid. It is also a time in which we should assess fiscal and monetary interventions and what needs to change going forward. If COVID-19 has taught us one thing, it is that orthodox economic policy is not fit to deal with the pandemic, and that institutions that merely promote economic orthodoxy will not assist the globe to stabilize and begin to chart a new economic policy path to deal with a globally economic inequality. The African National Congress driving a response in this question that is facing the nation. The ANC knows that in times of emergency, a leader rises, focused on what the nation expects of them, conscious of what the people need, and with all humbleness, guided by the organization's vision, works to change the situation for the better. This has been and continues to be the hallmark of the ANC government in dealing with the emergency we have been thrust into. As public representatives, this is the time when what is expected of us goes beyond party affiliation. For the ANC, it is about uniting the people behind a risk-adjusted strategy that will ultimately contribute towards saving lives and out of adversity, emerging more resilient and determined that we have a new nation to build that requires all our wisdom and foresight. As the ANC, we have been mandated to lead and have a manifesto that was shaped by and speaks to the needs of our people. Our task today is to ensure that the needs of our people are addressed through the proposals found in the Adjustment Appropriation Bill, because it has to take into account government's changes to spending and reprioritization of expenditure in its response to the social and economic impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. The ANC economic strategy at this time needs to be restated so that we see the consistency of the ANC approach whilst addressing the economic and social needs of the nation impacted upon by this disaster. Parliament has received comprehensive reports on the response of government to the pandemic. These have been ongoing and have included ministerial statements which have afforded all political parties to respond and clarify themselves. We have, as public representatives, 6 tasks in this regard. Firstly, to continue to build an inclusive economy and provide stimulus measures, knowing that when we emerge from this pandemic, we cannot go back to what was there before. Secondly, to continue to promote investment in the key productive sectors of our economy, knowing that these sectors hold the greatest possibility of driving growth in our country. Thirdly, to drive infrastructure recovery investment in energy, water and sanitation, roads and bridges, human settlements, health and education, digital infrastructure, public transport, as well as investment in the rural communities of our country. Fourthly, to continue to build the democratic developmental state in line with the commitment to use the state to direct national development through fiscal distribution, effective regulation, procurement, and other relevant measures. Number 5, to provide an economic support package to the retail, manufacturer, transport, agriculture, tourism, informal and small business sectors of our country. And lastly, to reindustrialization and drive localization so that they become key pillars of national reconstruction and development, pioneering and an inclusive growth path. As the president said, the economic recovery strategy will be the measures we will embark upon to stimulate demand and supply through intervention such as substantial infrastructure build program, the speedy implementation of economic reforms, the transformation of our economy, and embarking on all other steps that will ignite inclusive economic growth, close quote. Any relief program takes into account the constraints that the country faces, and therefore the proposals in this bill address the developmental challenges and sovereignty of the country so that we do not, in addition to burden the pandemic economically, bond the country to greater levels of debt. Dealing with the false narrative, and I want to deal with the false narratives which have been pronounced here by the opposition parties. In terms of the supplementary budget and its adjustment appropriation bill, it supports the 3-phased approach to government to, number 1, preserve the economy through a set of immediate, targeted, and temporary responses, recover from immediate effects of the pandemic by supporting investment and employment, and position the economy for the faster growth needed to restore the country's long-term prosperity. Now, Chairperson, I have heard that Mr. Ryder made some statements here which have got false connotations. Amongst those, he makes a blanket statement wherein he begins to compare the prices for food parcels in different provinces as if they are standardized and there's uniformity in terms of what is put on those bags. And he falls short of telling us what is the price of a food parcel in the Western Cape province, which is under the administration of the DA. He did not tell us. In the provinces where he mentions the food parcel and the price tag attached to it, He fails to talk about the quality and the items that are entailed in that food parcel. What we have learned to know and what we have discovered is that in the Western Cape, they give our people food parcels that are substandard, and that most in other cases, you find that they give expired items in those groceries. He also makes an assertion that we are an authoritarian state. What does he know about authoritarianism? Can he really tell us about that? This government is the most democratic government. No other democratic government precedes this one. We have just emerged 26 years ago from the most draconian state of apartheid, and they were silent. They never opposed that state when it declared the war against our people. Now that as a nation, we are confronted by an enemy in the form of the COVID-19, instead of uniting behind the government and come up with ideas in a manner that is constructive, they continue to play in the game of politicking, and they tell themselves that they are in opposition. There is nothing patriotic about what they are doing. To me, they are acting like outsiders within South Africa. And therefore, I think it needs to be condemned, their behavior. And of course, maybe we need to make a plan to workshop them about the actual meaning of opposition politics, not what they are talking about and not what they are doing. And Chairperson, I want to also say that Mr. Ryder is saying that we are not spending much money in the health and education sector. I don't know where he gets these facts, because this government has invested a lot of resources in the education fraternity as well as the health fraternity. The NHI is a true example of the commitment and the political will of our leaders in terms of investing in the health sector. And the bulk of the resources, they go into local government, which is in the cold face of our community. So I don't know what he's talking about, that we're spending money in different terrains. Of course, we are concerned about the corruption and the elements that are corrupt within our government. And I think our leaders are dealing with that. And they have shown true commitment with the swift responses that they have displayed throughout the history of the new dispensation, and obviously even during this period when we are facing this pandemic. I also want to say, Chairperson, that it cannot be encouraged to see some of the colleagues that are honorable members in this House using vulgar language, referring to the president and the cabinet as headless chickens. That needs to be condemned, comrade, because it is against the spirit of democracy. It is also against the spirit of the values of Ubuntu, where young politicians are insulting people who could be equal to the age of their own parents. This needs to be condemned because it is totally un-African. On the proposal by the EFF honorable member, who says that we must consider the centralization of the procurement, and that proposal comes from the ANC. They must not poach the policy proposal. They must not poach the policy proposals of the ANC and make them as if they belong to them. It is the ANC that is the custodian of all these policy proposals. And people must be clear that the ANC as a progressive political party, that is a ruling party in this country, is very much full of wisdom and is capable of transforming this state to what we want it to be. And therefore, the ANC supports the adjustment appropriation bill, and we call upon these opposition leaders to change their approach to issues, especially at a time when we need to unite as a country. They must stop this behavior that they are playing, which is really not helpful. Chairperson, the ANC is in full support, and we have full confidence to Minister Mboweni, together with his team, with what they have put before us, and therefore this budget is fully supported. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. I see the hand of Plenary is up. On what point do you want to rise, Honorable Plenary?
Thank you very much, Chair. Now, Chair, I was going to raise a point of order, but now that Honorable Kiva has already finished, I was just going to remind him that we understand that he finds himself in Parliament by singing poems. So that is why he's singing for supper even now. But anyway, he has finished. Thank you very much.
No. So, Honorable Ocamp.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson.
On what point are you raising?
Honorable Chairperson, I would first like to ask whether it is parliamentary for this platform to mute members of parliament. We must be able to raise points of order. It is unparliamentary and it is unfair if you allow the ANC members to interrupt when DA members are speaking and not mute everybody, but when the ANC members are speaking, you are muting everybody. So we can't interrupt. We can't give our interjections.
You can be unmuted.
It is
You can be
unfair.
unmuted if you persistently disrupt the proceedings.
Unfortunately,
and if you don't conduct yourself
you're not even allowing me to speak now. You are interrupting me whilst I'm making my point of order. My point of order is that there was a member of this House, Honorable Ryder, who rose on a point of order, and you refused to listen to him. That is not what the rules say. You should have listened to him. Honorable Mkiva could have waited a moment until the Honorable Ryder rose his point of order. And you could have ruled on that and we could have carried on. But you did not do your job. You should have listened to him. So I'm asking two things. Please recognize points of order and hear them and make your ruling on that. And secondly, please don't mute us. We would not have carried on and asking you to follow parliamentary rules if you did not unmute us. Please unmute us. It's unparliamentary. We should be able to talk. Thank you very much.
You speak as though you are in power.
We only unmute you under exceptional circumstances.
I've been raising my hand,
If you
Chairperson.
don't do what is expected of you in terms of
I will be recognized.
My hand is up, Chairperson.
Honorable Ryder, before we go to the Chief Whip.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, what you have done today by sidelining me when I had a valid point of order, when I had my hand up, when I followed all of your rules, you continued to sideline me. You would not listen to me, and you forced you made people mute us. So you haven't heard my point of order yet, sir. I demand an apology from you for not listening to me, for putting me on mute when I had a valid point of order. You prejudged what I wanted to say. So I will now get to my point of order, Mr. Chairperson, but I am saying that I would like an apology from you directly, because my point of order is now demonstrated by the virtual background that you see behind me, okay? There was a ruling from Parliament that we all use the same virtual background to avoid things like I have done now by putting up funny statements behind us or putting up things that could be considered unparliamentary. So Honourable Nkivi, I beg your pardon, Honourable Nkiva has an unauthorized background behind him and gave his speech with someone, we couldn't see the face, we can't see who it is. But the point is that we are all required to use the parliamentary background. And there's a good reason for that, Chairperson. Had you heard my point of order timelessly, you would have heard, you would have been able to make the right ruling, and I wouldn't have had to put up things like I've put up now behind me, Chair.
No, thank you very much.
The way I've been treated. Thank you.
Thank you very much. But when the meeting began, as is a tradition, the deputy chairperson of the NCOP went through the rules that apply and explain the processes. I just want to repeat this. I want to quote a reading and her words. She said, delegates should note that anything sent to everyone via the chat screen is deemed to have been said to the House and may be ruled upon, close quote. Now, this refers to, as you can see, the chat screen. But this applies as well as Honorable Ryder has already indicated. The use of the background that we have just used now. Maybe other members may not be aware, but there's a Zoom group chat that has been going on all along, and various debates are taking place parallel to what we're doing in the House. Just to say that all of that is noted, and we may have to come back to the House just to clarify and emphasize the procedures and the processes as we continue to do, but we come back just to emphasize some of the points. So thank you very much, honorable members. I'll allow Honorable Chief Whip to say so to make it.
My hand has been up.
Make his comment. No. The only name that I hear on raise your hand application is Honorable Ryder, Honorable Okam, and the last name is Honorable Chief Whip say so Mohai. So I'm going to ask Honorable Mohai to indicate to what point she is raising.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. First of all, we need to appreciate the manner in which we have directed the proceedings under very rowdy behavior in the House. And whereas the presiding officer deserves to be heard without any interruption when he intervenes in providing rulings in the House, particularly in cases where irrelevance and repetitive points are made. So, Chair, I will just say from the point of being Chief Whip that some of the matters that has been leveled in the House as allegations, either with regard to time, that such matters through the presiding officer's table staff should be reported to the Whipari meeting for further deliberations, and also very much destructive comments that are made in the chat group, which are tantamount to undermining the very rules of the House that must maintain orderly behavior and conduct of members in the House at all material times, have been violated. So those issues would warrant further scrutiny in the relevant meetings. But the point I'm making, Chair, is that we should appreciate that although tested in whatever manner, you kept utmost integrity in terms of steering the proceedings as a true Democrat yourself. So some of the issues will have to go further in the forums, the Whipari forums, as a report from the table staff, particularly to disprove or confirm some of the points that are raised here under the glamour of point of order. I'm really disturbed by Honorable Ryder, who, whilst deliberately aware of what the rules provide for with regard to party, regalia, and so forth, deliberately makes something that he knows that it is false. And I think that these matters have to be looked into moving forward, Chair of the Council. Thank you very much.
I look forward to that. I'll really look forward to that. Bring the charges.
The point, and then we pursue the issues as indicated by Chief Whip. Rest of them, honorable members, I will now go right ahead and call on Honorable Mweni to close the debate.
Chairperson, I'm right.
Chairperson, there is a point of order.
There's a point of order here.
Honorable Mweni.
Chairperson, there is a point of order.
Honorable Mweni.
Chairperson, there's a point of order. Mweni can't speak when there's a point of order. There's a point of order.
Chairperson.
So let me give you an opportunity so that you know we conclude on this matter. You are the last person to speak on this matter.
Chairperson, the piper that spoke earlier on from the ANC benches misrepresented. Chairperson, I'm saying the piper that spoke from the ANC benches misrepresented the EFF. We said centralizing tenders will actually be taking lifting to another
Honorable
level.
Chair, can I rise on a point of order?
I just wanted to correct the piper. That poet just spoke.
Honorable Kause, that's not the point of order. We will now proceed. Honorable Mboweni.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Deputy Chairperson and honorable members. Thank you very much for the debate and the discussion. Although occasionally interrupted by one thing or the other, sometimes, but I appreciate the debate and the discussion. My job is to refocus members of this honorable house to the central issues that we're dealing with. We're dealing with the Appropriations Adjustment Bill, which basically is a supplementary budget occasioned, as I said at the beginning, by the COVID-19 pandemic and its devastating economic impact. Primary is the fact that the projections and the allocations we had made in the February budget have now begun to be no longer attainable. And therefore, we've been put in a situation where the force of circumstance has made it necessary for us to present this appropriations adjustment budget. The economy has shrunk. Now GDP is expected to be much, much more in depression than we thought, rather, let me say, in contraction. The recession is going to be deep, more than we have seen in many, many decades. The logical consequence of that at a technical, practical level is that our revenue collection is going to shrink. And yet the demands on the fiscals will still increase. So the tension that is going to be there between the need for expenditure within the context of declining revenues means, in practical terms, that our resources are insufficient to meet our expenditure needs. In that situation, technically, it means there's a funding gap that must be closed. And how are we going to close that funding gap? We do that, amongst others, by reducing expenditure. Focus on some of the expenditure items that can be postponed. Reprioritize towards the COVID interventions, which are necessary in order to protect lives. It means that we have to increase our domestic and international borrowing. In brackets, let me say that borrowing is committing the future generation to repay that borrowing. Borrowing is not free like some members from the EFF think. That has to be paid back when it's due. That is committing future generations to pay. I close the brackets. Therefore, in the budget, we indicate what the borrowing requirements are going to be. It is within that context that on a weekly basis, we continue to issue treasury bills. Sometimes up to 20 billion rand a week that we issue the treasury bills in the domestic market. Internationally, we have sought to borrow, as I indicated earlier, from the IMF, from the BRICS Bank, African Development Bank, and also from the World Bank. Last year, we issued $5 billion in the global bond market. This year, we will be borrowing directly at much reduced rates from the institutions I've mentioned. But that borrowing as well has to be repaid in the future. I want us to understand, honorable members, honorable chairperson, that trying to close the funding gap by borrowing is not a solution. It's a temporary intervention, fully cognizant of the fact that going into the future, we have to repay that which we borrow, whether it's in the domestic market, in the treasury bills market, or the domestic bond market, or the global bond market. These borrowings are not a gift, but a commitment to repay when the time comes. I've listened very carefully to some of the difficulties which are there in the management of funds which have been made available for COVID-19 interventions. I think irrespective of our different political persuasions, at this moment, at this hour, we have to work together to ensure that every cent budgeted for must reach the purpose for which it was budgeted. All of us as members of this House have a responsibility, together with our political organizations and our ward councillors and all councillors in the country, as this huge political army in this country, to ensure that funds budgeted for reach their stated objective. Ours is a generation that's been called upon to rise to the occasion despite our different political persuasions. And in this regard, I once again would like to thank you very much for your contribution. I can indicate to this House that this conversation we are having here has also taken place within the context of NEDLAC, where our social partners and ourselves have conversations about what to do for our country. Now that we're dealing with the pandemic, the most pressing, urgent task before us is restarting the economy to ensure that the jobs which are still there are protected, new jobs can be created, and enterprises which have come under severe pressure can start coming back to life. It is going to be a long journey, but if we walk the journey together with a single purpose of putting our country and our people on the front burner, we can indeed succeed. Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, thank you very much. Chairperson of the committee that processed the budget, I thank you very much for your work. It has been a great honor and privilege to work with all of you. And once again, I wish you good health, safety, and I thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. Well said. Marumo Fati. There being no other business, the House now stands adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. We can unmute the Chair.
Siyayikhasa le ndaba, Chair.
Thank you so much. Bye. Have a good weekend.
Ciao, Joe.
Happy weekend.
Happy Chief Whip.
Yes,
That must know this thing.
Sharp,
That must know this thing.
Busy. You must now go back.
You must behave, Tata. You see, we don't allow to wear this. You see that?
Thank you.
See you. Have a good weekend.
Hey, same, man. Thanks, thank you. Thanks, Nana. Okay. Yes, Stella. Okay.
Bye, Chief Whip.
Enjoy your weekend.
Salamondla. Thank you.
He gave the country freedom, and he was a very good man and a very good act.